do the Pledge of Allegiance tonight. We might as well. It's an official meeting.
Are we supposed to stand?
You can. We do it rotary. Yeah, we do it rotary.
Not appropriately. Okay.
Right.
You have to do it. You must do a warning, Jason.
Oh, that's a good point, Mary. We can probably do it sitting down because I probably don't want let's just say my outfit does not match.
Thank you. That's
Gotcha.
what I was saying.
That's why I thought of that.
I always.
Deputy Mayor, that's enough information right there. Just,
yeah, exactly.
we'll trust you.
Are we ready to roll, Brianna?
Yes, we are.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Lakewood City Council for Monday, April 19, 2021. Madam Clerk, if you'll call the roll.
Councilmember Bell,
Here.
Councilmember Boki,
Here.
Councilmember Brandstetter,
Here.
Councilmember Farmer,
Here.
Councilmember Moss,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Whalen,
Present.
and Mayor Anderson has been excused. You have a quorum.
Very good. And we will spend a moment of silence thanking our men and women serving overseas and certainly locally for their fine service to this country. Followed by our Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, and we can do it seated. So we should stand up if we can. I know. I pledge allegiance
To
the flag
of
of the
the
United
United
States
States of America,
and to the republic
to the republic for which it
one
stands,
nation, under God,
one nation, under God,
under God,
indivisible,
liberty,
indivisible,
justice for all.
justice for all.
liberty, and for justice for all.
Well, that went kind of okay, but we haven't done it. Haven't done it in a while, so you know we can always do things for the first time. Well, tonight we are pleased to enter into our proclamations and presentations section of tonight's agenda, and we first have recognition of the Boys and Girls Clubs of the South Puget Sound, their Youth of the Year. And our Youth of the Year for 2021 is Azalea Riviera. And so I would like to call on Azalea if she is with us tonight. And I believe she's joined by Christine Capoto, the Lakewood branch manager, and Jenny Horan of the Boys and Girls Clubs. And while they come on board and we can give them a nice round of applause, I just want to share that Azalea has been a member at the Boys and Girls Clubs of the South Puget Sound and Lakewood branch for over 12 years. During her time at the club, she's participated in the youth leadership programs, Torch Club and Keystone Club. She's led food drives and clothing drives to help support teens experiencing homelessness. She's participated in the performing arts productions at the club as a performer, as well as with production setup, greeting, and working concessions. Azalea has been a mentor to younger club members, helping them with their homework during Power Hour and by helping to organize and serve at club events. Not only is Azalea a leader at the club, she's been a captain of the Clover Park High School girls varsity basketball team since she was a sophomore. So we're proud to have you here with us. Thank you for joining us tonight. And we would like to give you the floor to give us your 3-minute speech that you prepared. And with that, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Great, thank you. Hello, my name is Azalea Riviera. I'm a senior at Clover Park High School, and I have been attending the Lakewood Branch Boys and Girls Club for 12 years. After all these years, I keep coming to the club because of the relationships I formed. And I was very quiet and reserved, but that didn't stop my staff. They were always there letting me know I was seen, valued, and I had a voice they wanted to hear. The first staff I remember connecting with was Scott Lohr. He was funny, outgoing, and open. He had the best games. Let me tell you, Mr. Scott was the king of games. His gym was a kid's paradise. Going to the club gave me the courage to try for flag football. At the age of 7, I was one of only 2 girls in the entire league. We were pretty good too. Winning most games, I learned I'm a leader and a trailblazer who isn't confined by gender norms or stereotypes. This confidence I carry with me now as a captain of Clover Park girls basketball team. Ms. D made me feel like I can accomplish anything. If Ms. D sees an issue, she will speak up and address it, not with complaints, but with solutions in mind. This has taught me to be a solution-minded leader who highlights the talents of my teammates and gives them the opportunity to shine. Life's obstacles. My parents' separation was a very difficult time for me. My mother, 2 sisters, and I all had to move in with my great-grandparents to help care for them. Both my great-grandparents have Alzheimer's disease. For those who may not know what that means, they have memory impairment. They may forget they're in their own home at times and say, "We need to hit the road, Jack." I feel helpless at times because there's nothing I can really do besides give them reassurance. The times I felt sad or how. She was always there to talk to me and give me one-on-ones if I needed to to vent to someone. Sal motivated me to keep pushing forward. She inspired me to become involved with Keystone, a leadership program at the club. My heart for service drives me in everything I do, from being a support to my single mother and siblings at home, an encouraging team captain at school, organizing clothing drives at the club, and even my future aspirations to have a career in the medical field as a certified nursing assistant. Service and community is what matters to me. Being the best citizen and support for those who are around is important to me. I'm a strong, capable leader who will create positive change in her community. I will continue to break down barriers, and I will continue to uplift and encourage others. I'm determined to live a life of service and open doors for those who come after me. My name is Asoya Revere, Boys and Girls Club of South Puget Sound, 2021 Youth of the Year. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming tonight and presenting your speech to all of us here. And I open the floor for council members who may want to express some words of appreciation and gratitude to your incredible service and great crowning achievement this year. Anyone?
Hi, yes, this is Patty. I would just like to congratulate you on this and just keep encouraging you. And I love your dedication and your passion and your connection to your family and your community. It all just came through so wonderfully, and just congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Moss?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to add to your list of dues.
Mhm.
I just want to let you know, you can always continue to believe in yourself. You can do whatever you set your mind to do. I'm proud of your accomplishments, and I look forward to following you going forward. Good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Moss. Councilmember Brandstetter?
Yes, Azalea, I want to add my congratulations to you and also my thanks for the impact that you have had upon others in the community and the example that you set to the rest of us, that differences can be made if you apply yourself to do so. And look forward to your being an active in Lakewood to do that, and in this 25th anniversary year of where we're really focusing on both the unity in the community. I think that the Boys and Girls Club and you and your fellow club members really helped to demonstrate that. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Brandstetter, and certainly on behalf of the Mayor, Don Anderson, and all of us, we wish you incredible success in your future endeavors and very much appreciate you coming tonight and so ably representing many of the students that you've helped at the Boys and Girls Club here in Lakewood. So thank you very much for coming, and thank you for being you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
That's great. Well, good. Well, with next, we get to turn to talk about more opportunities for youth, and we will go now to a proclamation, or turn now to a proclamation declaring April 24th, 2021 as Parks Appreciation Day. And for this, I would call on Jason Gerwin, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, and along with Councilmember Bell, who will present the proclamation. So I think Mr. Gerwin will appear, and then Councilmember Bell, I believe you have the floor, and I hope you have the proclamation.
I do. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, great. So the proclamation, whereas parks, playgrounds, nature trails, open spaces, community and cultural centers, and historic sites make a community attractive and a desirable place to live, work, play, and visit. And whereas parks and a place where people can reflect, re-energize, or socialize, a place where everyone is welcome regardless of age, race, beliefs, or social and economic status, and a place where a sense of community is created. And whereas use of Lakewood's park significantly increased during the last year when our city, our nation, and the world were affected by the coronavirus pandemic. And whereas local businesses and areas of the community may have been closed, but the parks were open for business and people flocked there to escape the fear and isolation of disease, to boost their mental health, to add recess period to their virtual school day, or for a variety of other reasons to stay and play close to home. And whereas the City of Lakewood Parks, Recreation, and Community Services Department encourages citizens to celebrate the value and enhance quality of life that parks bring to our communities. And whereas park supporters of all ages will volunteer their time to clean up and beautify Fort Steilacoom Park, Springbrook Park, the Lakewood Community Garden, and other specific beautification projects throughout Lakewood on Saturday, April 24th, 2021. Now, therefore, the Lakewood City Council do hereby proclaim April 24th, 2021 as Parks Appreciation Day in the city of Lakewood, and urges all citizens to show support by masking up and safely visiting, beautifying, and protecting our parks. Proclaimed this 19th day of April 2021. Congratulations.
Thank you, Councilmember Bell. We appreciate that. On behalf of the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, we thank all the council members and City Manager Caulfield for the ongoing and continued support you guys give to the Parks Department. I think the proclamation says it right. I mean, I think we're really understanding the true value of parks in this past year being under lockdown and the importance and the investment in making it. And that's something that our community members have done for years. Lakewood being one of the founding members of Parks Appreciation Day, our community has invested thousands of hours over the year into our parks, and our community sees the value in parks. And so we thank the community for that continued support. We thank council for that continued support, and we look to get a lot of good work done on Saturday the 24th. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Jason. On behalf of all of us here, City of Lakewood, thank you, and the volunteers on the Parks and Rec Advisory Board for all the fine work you guys do, continue to do, and have done over the years. So we look forward to a great summer season with lots of great events coming up.
We're going to keep plugging away, and we hope to, nice to just see all your faces here tonight,
Yeah.
and hopefully we get to do it in person sometime soon. I mean, I heard lots of people getting the vaccine, and so hopefully we're getting there real quick. But thank you for your continued efforts and support.
Very good. Well, thank you.
Okay, good night.
Good night. Next, we turn to a proclamation recognizing J.P. Bega, Cody Orcutt, Mokia Tennant, and Alex Thomason for attaining the rank of Eagle Scout, which is indeed an incredible event in one's life. So I would like to call on these Eagle Scouts, along with Councilmember Farmer, for the opportunity to receive a proclamation and acknowledging your contributions to our community. Councilmember Farmer.
This is exciting for me. I was a Girl Scout. I was never a Boy Scout, but the whole Eagle Scout thing is just amazing. It's so much work goes into it. So I'm really excited to be able to give this proclamation. So whereas the City of Lakewood takes pride in the collective work of our community and the volunteer efforts of our citizens, and whereas the vision of the Boy Scouts of America is to prepare every eligible youth in America to become responsible, participating citizens and leaders who are guided by the Scout oath and law, and whereas the Boy Scouts of America encourages Eagle Scout candidates to complete worthy projects to improve their neighborhoods, community, and the region, and whereas an Eagle Scout devotes endless hours fulfilling many requirements for the advancement in scouting, including attaining 21 merit badges, holding prerequisite ranks and offices in advance of coordinating their Eagle Scout project, and completing an examination by the Eagle Scout Board of Review. And the Eagle Scout is the highest award a Scout can receive, and only a few move through the ranks of Scouting. In 2019, only 8% of all Scouts made it all the way to Eagle. Even more rare is a Quartermaster project, where nationally only 35 accomplished this in conjunction with the Sea Scout program. And whereas for his Eagle Scout Community Service Project, JP Bega from Troop 436 directed volunteers for 365 hours in 2016 to create community garden planting beds, and then returned in 2019 and created garden benches in the Springbrook neighborhood to complete his Quartermaster project for the Sea Scout program. And whereas for his community service project, Cody Orcutt from Troop 436 directed volunteers in the creation of a community library and food pantry kiosk in the Springbrook neighborhood. And whereas for his community service project, Makoya Tennant from Troop 436 directed volunteers for 123 hours of working on the creation of a Western State Hospital Historic Cemetery Monument Path. And whereas for his community service project, Alex Thomason, again from Troop 436, I'm seeing a pattern here, directed volunteers for 113 hours working on a Western State Hospital Historic Cemetery Sign Replacement Project. And now, therefore, the Lakewood City Council do hereby recognize JP, Cody, Makoya, and Alex on their personal achievements of attaining the rank of Eagle Scout, the highest rank in the Boy Scouts of America. Proclaimed this 19th day of April, 2021, Don Anderson, Mayor.
Congratulations, gentlemen. I will certainly will applaud you and then give you each a few moments to have the floor if you'd like to share a little bit about your experiences or your project. Why don't we start with Cody?
I really don't have that much to say right now, but I'd like to thank you all for the opportunity to let me work for your city and be a member of the troop in the city of Lakewood. It's been great. I spent most of my scouting career here, and it's been an honor.
That's great. Mr. Tennant, how about you? Would you like to say a few words?
Yes, thank you. Hi, my name is Makoya Tennant, and I'd like to express my gratitude to my troop, Troop 436, and everyone that helped me achieve this great accomplishment. My parents, my family and friends, and the beneficiary of my project was Grave Concerns, and Miss Laurel Lemke. This was actually her idea for the pathway around the monument. And I was just really glad I got to help them out. I had been part of their association since I was in Cub Scouts in third grade. And so it was great just being able to give back to them. I saw this as a great opportunity and to support them. I believe that this will better access to the monument will allow to help raise awareness for their heartfelt work being done there. And that is restoring dignity to the former patients of Western State Hospital buried in the cemetery at Fort Silicon Park. I just like to give my thanks to Grave Concerns again, and thank you, council members and City of Lakewood, for this recognition.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your contributions to our community. JP, do you have any words of wisdom for us?
Didn't put together a little speech just like Makoya, but I would like to just thank the City of Lakewood for providing me the opportunity and support that allowed me to give back to this wonderful community. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Alex, you want to say a few words or make an appearance? Not sure if we can hear you yet. Certainly no requirement, but we just wanted to give you an opportunity to say hello. Looks like you're still muted. Well, we want to collectively thank you again for your community service projects, your contributions to the community. the opportunities to interact with many great organizations like Grave Concerns. And it's a chance for us to say thank you to you. So on behalf of all of us, once again, thank you for coming. And we appreciate the opportunity to meet with you. So have a great evening. Study hard because I know tomorrow's still a school day, right? All right, thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate it. And I believe the clerk will provide a copy of the proclamation for you to have. So I assume that that has been issued or will be forthcoming. Great. All right, well, have a great evening.
You too. Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you.
And now we are pleased to turn to the Youth Council report, and I would like to call on Brandon Elliott, who I understand will be giving the Youth Council report and the Harrison Prep School update. I think it's Trissy is here to give the Clover Park School report as well, and Denise Ships will give the Summit Olympus School report. So if you are all here, feel free to kind of turn your screens on and let us know you're here. Okay, who's first?
Deputy Mayor, it appears that Trissy is here with us. I do not see the other students at this time.
Trissy, we'll let you go ahead and give your report then. Thank you for coming.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
So, hello, thank you for giving Youth Council an opportunity to meet with all of you in this fine evening. I hope you all are having a great day. I am Trissy Elizaga, and I will be giving the report for Clover Park High School. Hybrid learning is going well as planned, and an approximation of 55 students. And for freshmen, with an approximation of 62%, have chosen in person. There is an event that will happen in Clover Park High School on April 21st, Wednesday, 5:30 p.m. This event is for students with physical and learning disabilities. This event will hold a virtual presentation on how the students with special need will transition into a higher education. And that will conclude my report for Clover Park High School. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Trissy. We appreciate you coming, and I trust the school year is going well for you. So,
thank you.
You're very welcome. So, Brianna, we don't have the other two students. They haven't shown up yet?
That is correct. None of the other students have joined us as of now.
No problem. Let me know if they do show, but we will move on now to the public comment portion of tonight's agenda. Public comments are accepted by mail, email, or by live virtual comment. Comments may be mailed in advance or emailed to Brianna Schumacher, the city clerk, at 6000 Main Street Southwest, Lakewood, Washington, or to B. Schumacher, SCHUMACHER, at cityoflakewood.us. Comments received up to 1 hour before the meeting have been provided to the City Council electronically. And Ms. Schumacher, do you have folks who have submitted electronic comments to us for the evening?
Mayor Anderson, we received no comments in advance of this evening's meeting.
Very good. So then we have the opportunity for virtual comments. If you would like to provide live public comment, if you haven't already done so, you can join the Zoom meeting as an attendee by calling the telephone dial at 1-253-215-8782 and enter the meeting ID code, which is 868-7263-2373, or visit zoom.us and enter the meeting ID for tonight's meeting as reflected on the screen, which is 868-7263-2373. So with that opening bit, in public comment, individuals are provided 3 minutes. If you are representing a group, you get more time than 3 minutes. The clerk will monitor the time, and so please be respectful when your time is up. First tonight, we have Julian Wheeler.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Actually, I'll be representing the Pierce County Accessible Communities Advisory Committee. I serve as chair alongside other volunteer commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity. I don't know, this is the first time I've ever gone first, so it's kind of awkward. But anyway, I do want to say happy birthday to Lakewood 25th and a happy Earth Week. And just on a personal note, congrats to the young people on their awards. I volunteered at the Fort Slocum Cemetery, and like some of the scouts, and like Azalea, I've experienced the family challenges like parents splitting up. So I can sympathetically understand those challenges. And I believe among some of the young people, perhaps all of them, I think we've met a future mayor, council member, executive, or senator, governor, maybe even president. So I feel privileged to be here for that award ceremony and that report from Clover Park High School. The reason I'm actually here is to announce our next Pierce County ACAC general session on Tuesday, May 11, 9 o'clock in the morning on Zoom. And it's going to be a 2-hour meeting. We have 2 hours scheduled. And I do want to invite people here to attend. We are acting under the mandate of the 2010 Accessible Communities Act. We are looking for new members and new ideas. And we help expedite funds for accessibility projects in Pierce County. And as I had just want to make sure that we understand diversity, includes a lot of rich and vibrant fabrics of backgrounds, and that we can add disability to that. And as far as accessibility issues go, I want to quote a deputy mayor whose name doesn't come to mind right now, but I think it's he said that to paraphrase, I think he said that our diversity is the darndest. Or maybe our diversity, we're darn diverse. That's what I think his name is Deputy Mayor Jason Whalen, I think. Are you acting mayor now? So anyway, congratulations. And I look forward to all the good work that you're doing. And till next time, thank you for this opportunity.
Well, thank you, Julian. I appreciate that. No, it's not a bloodless coup tonight. Mayor Anderson is on vacation, so it's one of my duties to step in honorably, hopefully, and serve. But thank you for always showing up. We appreciate your comments. Mr. Haugen, you're next.
That little unmute button doesn't come up till after I get started. So can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay, well, kind of good news. There's a lot of enthusiasm for Trump policies, a return to Trump policies, especially along the border and taking back the United States from the drug cartels. Now, I never know when I'm talking to a West Coaster because people aren't divided so much as they're divided by information and what news sources they watch. And once they become informed, because there's a couple of main stations that don't do anything on the border, and they basically sit in there and tell lies all day. Another thing I have to say is, the Democratic Party is supposedly the party of inclusiveness and diversity. I take issue with that. The Democratic Party has been racist since the Civil War. They just do it in a different way. I spent some time in Atlanta. In fact, I got 4 issues here where the Democratic Party hurt Afro-Americans. Take Atlanta. The leader there, Stacey Abrams, of course, wants a certain law which makes it easy to cheat. But blacks don't want that and whites don't want that. So she stirred up a fuss, and the MLB went from Atlanta to Denver. That meant $100 million in business. And guess what? 41% of the businesses supposedly in Atlanta are owned by blacks. and 51% of the population is blacks. So the Democratic Party screwed Afro-Americans. Then if you want to go to Portland, the mayor, the Democratic mayor there and the Democrats there turned loose 45 felons on the population. Who do you think is a victim to that? Then you go to Brooklyn Center in Minnesota, and they fired the black manager for simply saying that the policeman deserves due process. And then you go to Seattle, which was on the news with Lawrence Jones. And guess what? The homelessness and the drugs have been expanding. Now they're on the schoolyards, 2 of them. So when you take your kids to school, you got to walk through the needles and all the other crap to get your kids to school. That is only going to increase in Washington. You're a sanctuary state, and you have all kinds of rules to not cooperate with ICE. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haugen. Those are the only hands I see raised for public comment. That doesn't mean you don't have the opportunity. So if you're out there in the world and you'd like to raise your hand to speak at public comment tonight, you're more than welcome to do so. And I will give you a few seconds. Otherwise, going once, going twice, I will declare the public comment period of tonight's session closed. We now turn to the consent agenda. Madam Clerk.
A, approval of the minutes of the City Council study session of March 22nd, 2021. B, approval of the minutes of the City Council retreat of March 27th, 2021. C, motion number 2021-23, authorizing the execution of a cooperative use agreement with the Clover Park School District. D, motion number 2021-24, authorizing the execution of a purchase and sale agreement for parcel 67850000211, located at 9203 Veterans Drive Southwest for future parking for American Lake Park. E, items filed in the office of the city clerk. 1, Lakewood's Promise Advisory Board meeting minutes of March 4th, 2021, and 2, Planning Commission meeting minutes of March 24th, 2021.
Thank you very much. Is there any item that any council member may wish to remove from the consent agenda at this time? Let me get over to the panelists. Hold on here. Ms. Farmer.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I would like to pull motion number 2021-24.
Very good. We have motion 2021-24 removed from the consent agenda at this time. Do we have a motion to adopt the consent agenda minus item D?
So move, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
We have a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor of approval of the consent agenda minus item D at this time, please signify by saying aye.
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 Should have asked for further discussion, but I don't think there was any. We now move to item D, motion number 2021-24. Ms. Farmer, did you want to speak to that?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I have nothing but good things to say about motion number 2021-24. I simply wanted to take this moment to commend city staff for their vision and their follow through in making this parking area happen out near American Lake. I particularly wanted to thank Mr. Paul Busich, Public Works Department, Ms. Mary Dodsworth in Parks and Recreation, and Ms. Heidi Wachner, our city attorney, for their work on this. You know, the Veterans Drive project, while wonderful, did eliminate some on-street parking, and this is a step toward alleviating some of the already interesting needs for parking during summer when people get excited about going out and enjoying our parks and waterways. And so I just really, really appreciate the city taking this on and understanding some of the burden that our neighborhoods take on during the warm summer months. So thank you from me.
Thank you for your comments. Are we ready for a motion to approve motion 2021-24?
So moved. Not quite sure how this works.
We have a second.
A second.
Motion 2021-24 has been moved. Adoption by Councilmember Farmer and seconded by Councilmember Moss. Is there any further discussion on that particular motion? I echo the comments on the vision and implementation of really good, sound work on the Veterans Drive parking project. In the absence of any further discussion, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion 2021-24 has been adopted. We now move to the regular agenda, commencing with public hearings and appeals. This is the date set for the public hearing on the fiscal year 2021 Community Development Block Grant CDBG Annual Action Plan. And for this, I call on Mr. Gum. I think he's with us.
Good evening, Mr. Deputy Mayor, members of the council. Thanks for having me tonight. Tonight, again, is the public hearing for the draft fiscal year 2021 Consolidated Annual Action Plan, which includes amendments to the fiscal year 2017, 2019, and 2020 annual action plans. For fiscal year 2021, the City of Lakewood will receive $573,352 in CDBG funding and $321,730 in home funding. So in accordance with the CDBG Citizens Advisory Participation Plan, the Community Service Advisory Board began the annual action plan process with a public hearing on February 10th, 2021. That public hearing was to hear citizens' testimony on the needs for economic development, housing, community development, and public services needs for the citizens of Lakewood. This process does involve a 30-day comment period, which is in process April 1st to April 30th, with the public hearing tonight. Approval of the plan is set to come before council on May 3rd with submittal to HUD on May 14th. Proposed projects are provided in the council's agenda packet. They're described in the fiscal year 2021 annual action plan, which is available on the city's website. Recommended allocations for the 2021 plan are taken from the goals and priorities that are established in the 5-year 2020 to 24 consolidated plan. And as part of the 2021 annual action plan, all priorities of the 5-year plan are being addressed. So I guess tonight I wanted to point out that it's a hearing specifically to take a poll on citizens' comments, what's needed, kind of get the pulse and see if there was anything that we missed, anything that we may need to address differently. No funding decisions will come of this tonight. This does come back before council again on May 3rd, as I mentioned. And at that point in time, council will approve the plan, potentially make changes, whatever so forth comes, and then propose to send it to HUD on May 14th. So with that, I turn it back to the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Gum. Very much appreciated. This is the date set for the public hearing on the fiscal year 2021 Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan. If you would like to provide live public testimony on this public hearing, you need to join the Zoom meeting as an attendee. And I think the clerk will post again the telephone number and meeting ID number for the Zoom meeting here shortly. That telephone number is 253-215-8782. The meeting ID number is 868-7263-2373. It's on the screen for those of you joining us visually. Or you can visit zoom.us and enter the meeting ID of 868-7263-2373. Upon entering the meeting, please enter your name and other chosen identifier. Use the raise hand feature to be called upon. And when you're unmuted, please provide your name and city of residence. You'll be allowed 3 minutes to speak and address us during this public hearing. Outside of the public hearing, all attendees on Zoom will continue to have the ability to virtually raise your hand for the duration of the meeting. You will not be acknowledged and your microphone will remain muted except for when you're called upon. So at this time, let me go to my little screen here. We have, other than Mr. Brandstetter, who has his hand up, did you have a question, Mr. Brandstetter, or did you, I mean, you're not obviously going to testify at the public hearing.
I had a question for Mr. Gum, if I may.
Yep, you go ahead, and then I'll open it up to the attendees.
So, Mr. Gum, since we're more than halfway through the public comment period of 1 through 30 April, have we received any, or could you summarize public comment to date received during this period?
We have not received any public comments, written or otherwise, to date.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
You're very welcome. If there are no other questions of council to Mr. Gum, I will open this up to the public hearing as indicated. The first person who has indicated a desire to speak is Mr. Dennis Haugen. Mr. Haugen, the floor is yours for 3 minutes.
Okay. Dennis Haugen, Sioux Falls, South Dakota. The irony of this is that the country needs to create wealth in order to provide jobs for people entering the job market. What's interesting is you have no plans for creating wealth or even an understanding of what it is, but you do know how to get grants. And I might suggest to you, with what's been going on, there's kind of a war going on in the country. You know, the COVID-19 thing, the Democrats wanted a package that was 90%, everything else but the COVID problem. So people are starting to talk. You know, they're getting angry. They're realizing what happened. And so you probably better start thinking about how to create wealth. Wealth isn't created by investment. And investment taxes are competitive. And if your taxes and regulations are higher or sky high compared to everybody else, you're not going to get growth, and you'll always be beggars on the rest of the economy. If a filling station suddenly raises their gas price to $5 when everybody else is at $3, that's a lowering of revenue. He will lower his revenue. So I would be cautious, you know, and start getting people to think and speak and discuss and learn if you're on the West Coast. Because right now you are beggars of everybody else. Because nobody can stand to go to some of your locations. You can't live there because it's a mess. You can't do business there because of regulations and taxes. And there's no consciousness of where taxes should be. No discussion, nothing. Just what kind of grants can we get? What will the federal government give us? Well, I think that little bank is probably going to get a little harder, as it should. Thank you much.
Thank you, Mr. Haugen. I do not at this time see any additional hands raised indicating a desire to address the council during this public hearing. Unless I'm missing something, Ms. Schumacher, do you see any other individuals wishing to address the council during this public hearing?
Deputy Mayor, no one has raised their virtual hand to sign in to speak for the public hearing.
Okay, is there any further public comment or any further desire to address the council during this public hearing on the fiscal year 2021 Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan. Any further interest in addressing the council during this public hearing? If not, I will declare the public hearing closed. We now turn to ordinance number 751. Madam Clerk. Are you going to read the, yeah, go ahead. I'll let you
I
read.
apologize, I'm having an unstable internet connection. Ordinance number 751, adopting the Lakewood Station District Sub-Area Plan as an element of the comprehensive plan, amending the Lakewood Municipal Code by establishing a new Title 18C, Lakewood Station District Development Code, and amending Lakewood Municipal Code Chapters 18A 10, Basic Provisions, and 18A 20, Administration.
Thank you very much. And for this, I'm going to call on Tiffany Spear to give us a bit of an overview, but I would, after she provides the overview, ask council whether this is something we want to have considered tonight. If so, I'll certainly ask for a motion. If council would be more inclined to have further opportunity to address some proposed amendments by Mr. Brandstetter either tonight or at a further session, I'm going to open that up for discussion as well. But for now, Ms. Spear.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, members of the council, Tiffany Spear, Long Range and Strategic Planning Manager for the city. There are a number of things related within two ordinances, actually, not only 751, but 752, which is the next one on your agenda. Both relate to the Lakewood Station District sub-area. Within Ordinance 751 are the plan itself and then the related development code. And then under Ordinance 752, it is the SEPA-based planned action ordinance, which would serve as the tool by which anybody working to do a development under the Lakewood Station sub-area plan would be able to sidestep or use the already city-approved SEPA process in the future. So both of those things have some similar things to be discussed tonight, but I'll try to work my way through this as logically as I can. I'll start by sharing my screen. So once again, we're going to be moving through a couple of high-level items. The council, I know, has seen this several times with your study session and public hearing, but this is the zoning code for the city, and the hatched mark where the blue arrow is pointing is the area of this Lakewood Station District sub-area plan. So the boundaries, this would be Bridgeport Way Southwest. Across the northern side, excuse me, is 108th. It curves up and comes over to the 512 Park and Ride, and then comes down along Pacific Avenue as the southern border from east to west. On March 8th, you held a study session, and then on April 5th, you had a public hearing on all three of these documents: the sub-area plan itself, the accompanying development code, and then the SEPA checklist and planned action ordinance. Within your documents tonight, there was a number of things included as attachments. So the one titled Attachment A is Ordinance 751. And once again, that's the plan and the code. And it also has some amendments that are needed within Title 18A to refer to the fact that a new chapter or title is being adopted should this move forward. And then not yet up right now, but attached immediately thereafter is Ordinance 752. And that once more is the planned action ordinance related to the plan and the code. Attachment C, which followed after those two ordinances in your packet this evening, there's a list of amendments which aren't before you this evening with the rest of these for action, but they will be included in the 2021 comprehensive plan amendments, which will be before you probably next month. And then the final attachment was labeled D, and this is a table that summarizes the public comments received at the City Council hearing, and then also earlier on in the Planning Commission public hearing regarding all of these documents, and then the city responses to all of the public comments received. Just a step back as to what are the purposes and what are the reasons why adopting this sub-area plan would be beneficial to the city. First and foremost, the comprehensive plan has anticipated a sub-area plan in the Station District all the way back to its first version in 1999-2000. So it's something that's been anticipated by the residents in the area as well as the elected leadership of the city. Secondly, it responds to the public priorities which were voiced just this last year in the online surveys that was conducted with people who live or work or commute through the Sounder Station or the Lakewood Station District area. Third, it is, as I mentioned, an opportunity to speed up the permitting review for applicants. SEPA review is handled already by the Planned Action Ordinance. If a future project comes through that is within the boundaries of that Planned Action Ordinance's assumptions. And then there's also the hybrid form-based code proposed in the development code, which reduces the amount of time and detailed review required by the city for what's being proposed on a particular project. And then also we do have a number of significant transit resources in the city of Lakewood. So in the downtown, there's the Pierce Transit Hub. There's also on the corner of I-5, 512 and the city is the Sound Transit Park and Ride. And then of course you have the Sounder Station, which is right in the middle of this sub-area plan. A couple of things have been updated in this package since your public hearing. There were some corrected maps included in both the plan and the code. There was a revised bit of language needed in the Planned Action Ordinance and its checklist based on the process and public hearing which was conducted. The language was just waiting until we got through the public hearing process for update. And then there's a new chapter proposed within 18C that allows for a master planning approval that would be administrative for multifamily projects which were 4 or more families or 4 or more units that was previously not included in this sub-area process. So this is a master planning process similar to what was adopted as part of the downtown sub-area that's now been proposed in the Lakewood Station District as well. Public engagement, a high-level summary. The website's been up and running since December of 2019, and it's been kept updated throughout this process. There's been multiple Lakewood Connections magazines issues with information about the status of this planning process, as well as invitations to participate in the survey that was done or to seek information from the city about this process. There was an in-person stakeholder session held last February, and then once we were in COVID lockdown, things were handled virtually through now. There were a number of planning commission and then city council sessions, which are listed there, the various dates. There were mailings put out to residents and businesses within the sub-area, both in May of last year and January of this year. And then, as I've mentioned now a couple times, there was also an online survey, which was conducted over about 6 weeks in conjunction with Sound Transit. And then also an invitation for a walk shop where people could get a hold online of some materials that asked them to provide sensory feedback while they were walking around the areas of the sub-area proposed, and just give a sense of what it's like out there and what they like, what they didn't, what they'd want to see changed. There were 3 areas of focus that came to the surface rather quickly and remained at the top throughout this development of the plan and the code and the planned action. First of all, recognizing the demographics of those who live in this sub-area of the city. There was a risk of displacement, and there was a concern voiced by multiple entities and members of the Planning Commission wanting to make sure that people were not just displaced without any thought of where they may go next. Secondly was related to that, but affordable housing options, both for current and future residents. Back in that sub-area online survey, there was a broadly voiced excitement about interest in additional housing units near the Sounder Station. So people who were working or commuting through this area would be interested in maybe potentially living in this sub-area as well. So looking at whether it's rentals or home ownership, an increase in the number of affordable housing options and types within the sub-area was also a high priority. And then third was the use of, or excuse me, the requirements for parking, either on-street or off-street parking for projects going forward. And also how the rights of way within parts of the sub-area that actually were considerably wider than that needed for street design, how those could be used. And so what you ended up with in the plan and the code are discussions of green streets or boulevards, and also just having additional open space along streets that are wider than the 60 feet required for the street design itself, where you could have kind of a visual break, the ability to take walks or breaks along the side of the street on grass or other types of vegetation. There could be park benches potentially. So almost creating little linear parks in those areas of the sub area without having to acquire additional rights of way. You've seen this map before, but once again, this has a number of zones that were predating any discussion of a sub area, and none of them have changed. This is all the existing zoning. The idea within this sub-area planning process was not to change the zoning, but by changing what was required within the development code, making development within these zones easier and the ability to densify within all of these as well. The capacity for residential development is at about 720 dwellings, and the assumed and planned for employment capacity is almost 1,300 jobs. The need to continue to coordinate closely with utilities as time goes by and this densification occurs is something that was discussed with those utilities during the planning process. There's a question voiced, I'm sorry.
Oh, can I ask you a quick question on the last slide?
Please.
So the residential capacity with the proposed land use is 1,722 dwellings. What is it currently without adoption of the sub-area plan?
Well, it's that same amount, but
Okay.
what's happened historically is the MF3 area, for instance, this darker brown area, has only been built out at 20% of its maximum capacity.
Okay.
So what the assumption is here to come to this number is that it's going to go up to about 70% of maximum capacity. So over time, within this area, a number of single-family detached units may be demolished for either attached row houses, townhomes, or apartment buildings in order to increase densities.
So if it was the existing density, and we're doing nothing to necessarily increase density, right?
We're not changing the zone, meaning you can now go above because it's never come close to what the current maximum is. What we're doing is by coming over and jumping into a hybrid form-based code environment, hopefully making it an easier, more streamlined way to redevelop and densify to what's already allowed as the maximum.
Got it. Okay.
This is a map reflecting where registered properties were located, at least as of 2019, within the entire city. Within the rental housing safety program that the city administers. And this is obviously not the exact shape of the sub-area plan, but this is really where most of the residential development is located within the sub-area. There was a question raised about whether there was much activity with that rental housing safety program within the Lakewood Station District. This is some information provided through the end of last year and also some information from 2021 regarding registration. But 89 properties, 572 units, those that passed the initial inspection, those that passed re-inspection, you can see after a single walkthrough and the information provided to pass. I think this would, unless Mr. Gum wants to correct me or Mr. Buer, I think this holds true as it does across much of the city that these were not serious health safety failures. These were general lighter duty, if you will, needs to change things like GCFIs or other types of relatively minor items in the construction of these units. So other than that, just a report to say that yes, the properties that are rental properties within the sub-area have been engaged in this program at least since 2019. And for the most part, they have passed inspection and are healthy and safe to live in. One of the things I wanted to touch base on as well is given the demographics of this area, there was a discussion about missing middle housing. And sometimes people tend to think missing middle housing goes toward area median income, the amount of revenue a household may have, but actually what it's talking about are housing types. And so this is a great graphic here across the top where what you see are the single family detached, which is most of the residential area in Lakewood other than apartment buildings, which is at the other end of this scheme. And so what we're talking about encouraging within the sub-area plan would be the townhomes, the triplexes or the fourplexes, the courtyards. So these are that middle density, that moderate income types of housing that just has not been part of not only Lakewood's, but a lot of jurisdictions' planning codes for a long time now. And so the idea is to encourage some of this type of housing to come into play and allow for both rental and home ownership opportunities. This is just another graphic advertising some of the same things and how different types of development can be infill to existing development without causing a great deal of consternation. Some information that came from the regional level. In 2018, this is King County information, but this is holds true on a relative basis throughout all of the Puget Sound. Townhome costs were about 30% lower than single family detached. And then lower mid-rise condos were about 20% lower than single family homes. One of the basic differences between these types of construction and their ultimate sales price, of course, is the unit square footage. And also the smaller footprint or land for your quote yard that you may have with some of these attached products. This graphic just demonstrates down on the bottom is the gray part. Those are the attached permits that were approved between 2010 and 2018. The green, sorry, let me get the multifamily, the total permits, and the single family permits, as you see here. And what you're seeing is there's not enough of the multifamily coming on the market to answer the call given people's incomes, which have only risen about 1/10 of the cost of home prices having risen in the last decade. So one of the things that was brought up out of public comment was the fact that the sub-area plan as originally brought to the council had information and authorization in the code for single family detached, row houses, townhomes, and three or more units, three family attached units. It did not discuss apartment buildings or things with over 4 units. And so as I mentioned earlier, there's now before you tonight in the Title 18C, Chapter 700, an administrative process similar to that for the downtown, other than that it's administrative. In downtown, a hearing examiner decision is required, but here it's an administrative review and approval of a master plan for multifamily 4+ units or apartment buildings. So that is something that is now included in this and is recommended by the city for adoption. Going back up on this chart here, you'll see Deputy Mayor Whalen, some of the information I was talking about. As of now, in the multifamily area, there's about 475 units, and that's only 20% of the density allowed under MF3, how that area has built out. What's planned for with the theoretical and hoped for densification using attached home construction, getting up to about 68% of the maximum density by 2035. One of the other questions that was raised was regarding implementation over time. And within the planned action, there was a discussion of what the city might be doing in addition to adopting the code that would be governing any projects that came through sub-area for approval and then redevelopment. And one of the discussions was about the multifamily tax exemption program, which the city has in place. First of all, there's a typo here and there's an actual request for an amendment later this evening to correct the title of this chapter. But this chapter that governs the multifamily tax exemption program is going to be subject to amendment later this year based on action that's happened at the state legislative level. Within this last session, or the one that will be wrapping up this weekend, they did adopt a new bill that will be changing up the multifamily tax exemption program and allow it to be expanded for additional years. The other thing that is talked about in this section of the planned action is tiny homes, and the fact that per RCW 3521-684, cities are required to allow them. The city does currently allow tiny homes in its residential zones 1 through 4, and also manufactured housing parks. But unlike a city that owns its own utilities, sewer, water, power, Lakewood does not. And so even though its code may allow or permit these things outright or by conditional use, there's still that other hurdle that a property owner would have to meet, which is those requirements coming from the various utilities that govern water, sewer, or power. One other question that came up from City Council was form-based code versus a hybrid form-based code. This here is a graphic that shows what a pure form-based code does, which is it doesn't say anywhere what the uses allowed in these types of structures would be. There's just a density, there's a size of the building, but there's no list of what's allowed within these various buildings. So in theory, you could have a store next door to a residential area, next door to a school, next door to something else that have no relation whatsoever to each other than the ability of a developer to meet the size and dimensional standards per the code. A hybrid form-based code is a little different in that it has that same type of, you will build the building within these dimensions and place it on your lot with these various restrictions related to parking or the footprint on the parcel of your building. But it also has a list of uses allowed in a particular zone. And so for instance, in the Lakewood Station District, 18C 200 is the chapter that explains which uses are allowed. And it refers back to the citywide zoning scheme, which is listed in Title 18A. Both the downtown, and this is a map of the downtown sub-area regulating plan, and now the Lakewood Station District regulating plan, have streets as kind of the fundamental point of reference for what type of development can happen on a particular location going forward. So as you'll see on the right, there's the zones, which again are unchanged from the current area code and zoning map. But then you have all these various colored streets, and based on which street you're on, you would then go into the code and find on the codes listing, there's a table that would say, for instance, if you are on a residential street, these are the types of sizes of building you can have. This is how much parking is required. This is where the building has to be on a lot in relation to its on-street parking. These are the types of vegetation requirements you have. But there's much less of the, you're allowed to have this type of use in that building. It's simply looking at the street and then the design of the building. One other important point to make about these sub-area planning items that are in front of you tonight is its relationship to the existing downtown sub-area. The two are obviously within the same city. They are relatively close to each other. There's about a mile apart between the edge of one of the sub-areas to the other. But the idea is to take advantage of the transit hubs and the employment opportunities within the downtown and the Lakewood Station District. And they are designed in the same structural way, meaning there's a plan, there's a code, and there's a planned action. Both of the codes are hybrid form based, and some of the content within the plan for the Lakewood Station District is based on the same philosophies within the downtown, which the city spent time on and adopted ultimately in 2018. Like the downtown sub-area plan, the Lakewood Station District sub-area plan also has every 2 years incorporated into its enabling documents a review by the City Council. So beginning in 2023, should the council move forward and adopt this plan and code this year, there would be reviews of how development was occurring within the Lakewood Station District and if any changes need to happen to either the code or to the assumptions made in the planned action. So assuming this moves forward and is adopted, starting next year and even years going thereafter, the downtown sub-area would be up for review. And then starting in 2023 and in the odd numbered years after that, the Lakewood Station District would be reviewed by council. One other item that's been ongoing simultaneously with the Lakewood Station sub-area planning process is the sound transit improvements or access improvements to the Lakewood station. So they are in the middle right now of their public comment process, and they have sought out information and assistance from city representatives regarding potential access improvements to this area, pedestrian, motorized, and bicycle, all kinds. And by the end of the summer, there should be a draft version of the improvements that could happen. There's a total of $44 million available, so there could be some significant improvements around the station. But it's all weighed against the need for Sound Transit's board to review all of the improvements that are within its various approved packages over time, and to take a look at timing and scope of all of those projects throughout the Western Washington area, basically, to see what may need to slow down, what may need to change given their reduced revenue over the last year and a half because of COVID. So we're waiting to hear what the final number will be and what the final timing will be on whatever access improvements that the Sound Transit Board ultimately approves. Multifamily tax exemption, we've mentioned that a couple times, but this is in reference to that bill that has now passed both houses of the state legislature, moving to the governor for signature. It affects the length of time that the tax exemptions apply, and also allows for a new 20-year property tax exemption. This is all stuff that the Lakewood Station District, Sub-Area Plan, and the citywide code will have to be reviewed to make sure the city is consistent with the new bill once it's completed, once the session has wrapped up. But what I wanted to point out is in black and white here is the current residential target areas for the city. So this is the southern end of the downtown sub-area plan. That whole area is part of a residential target area where the MFTE program could apply. Springbrook's little butterfly shaped RTA is down south of I-5. And then the Lakewood Station residential target area, as you can see, this is the actual shape of the sub-area plan. This is obviously different from that. However, this RTA does include all of the MF3 area. So it's just a question of, as this larger scoped review of the multifamily tax exemption program happens by council, if the boundaries of this RTA or all of the RTAs are something that council wanted to amend. So there are a number of amendments here in front of you. I'll just walk very quickly through them. I tried to break them out by the two different ordinances that are actually on the agenda this evening. 751 is the plan and the code. And so if you remember in the public hearing and the study session prior to that, the Planning Commission has provided you a recommendation regarding parking, where they took away the minimums required for senior housing and multifamily housing. The original recommended language that came out of the year-long process with stakeholders and the public is what the city is recommending get reinserted. So we're actually recommending not to follow the Planning Commission's suggestion, but to go back to the original language in that section of 18C. Secondly, there was a question regarding one of the exhibits within the plan and just adding a footnote to explain what's in there. Third, amending, as I mentioned prior, the public engagement process, which was just sitting and waiting till it actually concluded to be able to update that language to its final form. And then there's various Scrivener errors that need to be corrected, such as the number of the chapter, spelling errors, date errors, that sort of thing. And then I know where I'm jumping ahead, but in 752, there's a couple of other things related to some Scrivener errors, but also correcting the chapter name for 3.64 in the city code. So I just mentioned this. This is the parking amendment, and the city is recommending that the original language in red be reinserted. This is that Exhibit 23. There was a question about where this referred type of construction was explained. It is coming from the Pierce County Assessor Treasurer system. And so the footnote is hopefully going to explain that for those reading the plan going forward.
Can you go back to the parking one real quick, just so we have another 5 seconds looking at that?
Absolutely. So if you recall, what the Planning Commission had recommended is that for senior citizen apartments and multifamily housing, there be no minimum parking at all. And that this language here, seniors or and market rate family housing, would go away from the reduction to parking required around the sounder station because there already would be no minimum required. What the city is recommending is that these original pieces to these chapter sections be reinserted.
Tiffany, what have they found in Tacoma at some of those mixed use projects? Have they found that the parking, do you know whether the developers have found it to be adequate or not? I think they were similarly 1 or 2 per unit.
I don't know if Mr. Buer is available to maybe answer some of that question. I know there's been concern actually with I'm going to lose the name of it. I've lost the name of it. North End.
Proctor Station.
Proctor District, thank you.
Yeah.
There were a couple of projects there where no minimum parking was provided, and there's been a lot of consternation about not enough parking. But I don't know if Mr. Buer or perhaps Mr. Caulfield has any information about other standards in other parts of the city.
Okay. And those on the screen you just showed us, those are not on street, they are off street parking requirements, right?
Yes, the overall position within the sub-area plan is that there would be no on-street parking allowed within this area, in part to allow for the transition over time from auto to other types of use of that travel way, so non-motorized rolling, walking, as well as the parks, the idea of the linear parks along the way.
Right. Hopefully no on sidewalk parking either. We see
Correct.
See a little of that going on in Veterans.
Yeah. Mr. Buer, did you have anything to add on the parking?
I have no additional information about Tacoma's situation other than what I've read in the newspapers and anecdotal information from individuals trying to find parking in the downtown.
Right.
That's been a problem.
Yep. That's what I've heard too.
Yep. Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Yes, sir. Do you want to ask a question? You bet, Mr. Branster. Go ahead.
Question of you is regarding the process for this evening. That the motion for the ordinances that we have are the ordinances as recommended by the Planning Commission, and staff has a list of amendments that they're recommending to us. That would it not be perhaps easier to move adoption of the ordinance and then consider and discuss each recommended amendment in turn and act on it rather than go through a presentation on all the amendments and then have to come back and move them and rediscuss them? I think we could move more through and quite possibly resolve and actually pass something amended or not to do that. And my only comment on the amendments is on the parking amendment, which is proposed as a single amendment by staff. I'd like to really consider it as 2 separate amendments because the Planning Commission made 2 distinct changes. One, a change for senior housing, and one, a change for multifamily housing. That there are some nuances of difference between those 2, and we could get to the same place or consider it the same amendments that staff would like to, but if we consider that as 2 amendments, one the senior housing amendment, one the multifamily amendment. And as you mentioned before, I have 1 amendment that's in addition to the staff list that I would like to make or propose. But I guess it's up to you how you want to run the meeting, whether we want to run through a presentation on everything and then return to readdress everything, or whether we could just get started and deal with things one at a time.
Well, I think I want to let Ms. Spear kind of complete her overview, and then we can have this conversation about process. And it may be that council may want to take a little bit more time by way of another mini study session to kind of chew on all this. But let me ask this question of Ms. Wachter. If council's desire was to do a study session and direct staff at a study session, assuming we tabled the motion for this evening or didn't act on it, if staff resurrected some of the items that were taken out that they recommend be put back in, such as the parking issue, would that then have to take the whole product back to another public hearing? Because it would be a different proposed sub-area plan than went to the initial public hearing?
You would be exceedingly wise to take the time to take it back to the public. And the reason that I say that is that the challenges that come in an administrative process are looking for any faults in the administrative system. And what people are going to claim is that they didn't have the ability to comment on what the council ultimately voted on. We could take the position that the changes were not substantive or the changes were not sufficiently significant, but we would be defending ourselves at that point. And so it could get traction. Even if we didn't win, it would delay it further. You're actually having less of a delay by going around and tagging the base again than you are by taking the chance that nobody's going to challenge it. If you don't have a lot of controversy and you assume nobody's going to challenge it, then you don't have a problem.
So addressing Mr. Brandsetter's question just for the moment, is there any procedural infirmity with regard to that, to proceeding to get the motion on the table and then go through each proposed amendment one at a time?
I would suggest doing each proposed amendment one at a time for purposes of legislative clarity. And, you know, having had to look into legislative history of things before, it is most clear if you do each item one by one so that somebody looking at what the council did can see that on each item, the vote went whatever way it went, right, rather than trying to guess. If there's 3 different items batched together, you can't necessarily tell exactly where the council was in agreement.
Very good. So before I go back to you, Ms. Spear, I see Mr. Boki has a hand up. Do you have a question on this particular?
I do, yeah. About parking. The parking thing, we've kind of gone back and forth on. The Planning Commission took a separate vote to reduce it to 0 in those 2 categories that you mentioned. But is the concern, I mean, we're talking about minimums. So is the experience of entities, municipalities that have gone with these lower parking minimums, is that because of cost considerations, the developers only build to the minimum level?
I would say yes in some situations. I'm going to defer to Mr. Buer, see if he has anything else to say.
Couple of things. First of all, as proposed by staff, this sub-area plan does reduce some of the parking standards. Okay. But it does not go to the level that the Planning Commission is suggesting. The plan also is something that we talked about parking at great length. About, you know, over time, there might be a need to make an adjustment to a lower number. And that would be something that we consider at a future date, but not at this time, because we don't believe the plan is ready for that lower level of parking. The other thing that I would suggest or point out is I would agree with Mr. Boki's comments that generally speaking, people build to the lower minimum standard, except for office and retail, where in the past they've tried to build to a higher standard.
So in this case, help me out. In our regular city code, so if I'm elsewhere in the community and I decide to build either senior housing or multifamily housing, first of all, do we have separate requirements for senior housing and multifamily housing? And what are those requirements in general outside of the sub areas?
Yeah, give me 1 second and I'll be able to open up a summary table that'll provide that for you.
Mr. Boki, we've not built that many senior housing projects in Lakewood. The one that I recall was about 112. The city did substantially reduce the parking. That was through a parking study process That was many years ago in, I believe, 1998.
Okay, and that was Shag. Is
That
what you're
was Shag at the
discussing?
time.
Okay. Okay.
Oops. So to respond to your question, Mr. Boki, forgive me, get to the right screen here. Here we go. So this is a comparison of the various parking requirements between what's citywide, what's within the original draft of the Lakewood Station District, and then what's allowed in downtown. So for ADUs, 1 per dwelling unit in both the citywide and the LSDS, and then downtown it was 1 per all housing type of dwelling unit. This is referring just to ADUs. For seniors, the Lakewood Station area and the senior citizens in the citywide would get the same. Downtown it would be less. Multifamily was a little bit less within the station district compared to citywide, but still more than what's required in downtown. The rest of these types of parking requirements, you'll see where the blue compares between the 2 sub areas. They are the same as each other, but they are different from what's required in other parts of the city.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
So, Ms. Beer, go ahead and finish up your presentation, then we can talk about process in a minute here.
All right.
Thank you for indulging us.
Sure. So there were a number of recommended amendments that I just threw out at you at 90 miles an hour, but we went over those once. We talked about the parking. We talked about the reason for a potential footnote within next to Exhibit 23 of the plan. Also in Ordinance 751, there was this need to update what happened with public hearings, et cetera. And so that's what this red line strikeout is that you see on the top. And then the remainder are really scrivener errors. Finally, once the council were to take up Ordinance 752, which is the planned action ordinance, there's a request just to correct the name of LMC chapter 3.64. And then again, similar scrivener errors that would be found once the final document is reviewed for codification and publication. And that concludes my report for you. If you have any other questions for me, I'm happy to try to answer.
I'll open the floor to questions from members of the council to Ms. Spear. Mr. Brandstetter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Ms. Spear, I just have a couple of questions regarding your presentation. You spoke about the implementation agreement having a review every 2 years, and that that this sub-area plan is supposed to work in coordination with the downtown sub-area plan. So I was wondering why the review of the 2 plans are staggered in separate years rather than planning to review them in a coordinated way every 2 years.
Well, when I say coordinated, I mean that it is anticipated there will be use of transit in both of the sub areas, and maybe the way to coordinate better how someone were to get off a Pierce Transit bus and end up at the Sound Transit station, for instance. And also as a developer being able to read and interpret similarly the code requirements or the zoning requirements within one of the sub areas versus the other. The biennial reviews, as they're set up within the planned actions for each or the implementation of the plans, state that it'll happen every 2 years, and that the intent of the review is to see, first of all, how development is doing within each sub area, and secondly, if the assumptions made for the SEPA planned action need to be changed. So to take that into real world, if you've got 4 years have gone by, for instance, with the downtown sub-area plan next fall, you're looking to see if the type of residential or mixed-use development that you anticipated in the downtown core was actually happening. And if not, why not? Is there something that needs to change with the code, for instance? But then also, if you have had some major development happen, do you need to change the brackets around the SEPA review so future development coming in maybe comes in at a higher density than ever anticipated in the planned action? You're taking that into account. So again, future projects don't have to go through SEPA individually. You're trying to anticipate that development over time. So the two reviews are really separate from each other for the two plan packages. Maybe I misused the word coordination, but the idea was that they are easily dovetailed with each other and also with the city code.
So essentially, the fact that essentially we'd be in a process of where each year one of the two sub-area plans would be being reviewed. And
That's the way it's set up right now, yes.
Is that the best workload model, given that there's work involved in doing those reviews, and but you'd have to be doing them every year as opposed to doing them in the same year? That's kind of a staff work situation, I guess, and so I understand that. My second question has to do with, you mentioned that we're creating an 18C 700 to establish a master planning process that wasn't in the original documents regarding the plan or the original 18C draft. What was the catalyst for creating this here at this juncture?
The public comment that the council received at the public hearing by Mr. Borman, as well as additional communications from the Borman family to city staff, were asking questions about how apartment complexes, for instance, or something higher than a 3-unit development could be done within the Lakewood Station sub-area. And this chapter is very closely, it's not verbatim, but it's very close to the master planning process that's already been adopted in the downtown. And so the thought was, let's bring that over into the Lakewood Station sub-area code as well. But what the decision was made as an offer to bring to you this evening was, rather than have it go through a hearing examiner review and approval, which is what happens in the downtown right now, let's let this be an administrative approval. So there's still conditions, there's still a requirement to do something above and beyond what code would otherwise require for getting approval of this project, but it is administratively done, which means it's faster and it's a little more predictable perhaps for the applicant.
Okay, I guess the deputy mayor's previous concern about changes that would necessitate reopening the public hearing or public engagement process, and that this is actually quite a new addition, and it significantly changes where certain kinds of developments are. Are we confident that this doesn't trigger a need to allow public comment for this process?
I don't know if I'm the correct staff person to answer that. Certainly we wouldn't oppose it. It's something that allows for recognition that something other than the allowed outright uses within the sub-area plan are also optional within this sub-area. So the duplex, the triplex, the single family attached are all encouraged throughout this, as I mentioned, regarding missing middle housing and moderate income housing. But there's also the ability now with this administrative master planning process to do the higher density apartment complex type of development as well.
Yeah, and I guess my question is that sounds like it's something that is a good addition to the plan. Just want to make sure that it's will pass the legal muster if we put it in to do that. That's my only concern about doing it. So maybe it's the city attorney, is this a big enough change that we ought to redo something?
My perspective on it is that if you have a change that changes the essence, the substance of what you're doing, you would then want to put it out for further public comment. If it's a matter of housekeeping, some of the things I reviewed earlier today, it may not rise to that level. If it's a matter of wordsmithing or making something more clear, or perhaps just creating a slightly broader category, not something dramatically broader, you should be fine.
Okay. Well, I guess I should just comment to the deputy mayor that this seems like a changing the types of uses that could be used in certain areas of the sub area and establishing a process to do that doesn't seem minimal to me, but even though it seems like a good idea. Ms. Spear, I just maybe had one last comment, and it goes back to the public outreach statements that are in the plan and the amendment that you had to clarify what they were. I guess could you characterize how well the minority ethnicities that reside in the sub area engaged with the process? I noticed that the only reference I could really find was that the survey was made available in Spanish and no responses in Spanish were received. But it wasn't any discussion about in the several other events whether there was involvement across the diversity of the area.
Given the fact that we were in the middle of COVID restrictions, we obviously weren't able to do optimal public outreach. And that would be the case with any of the planning documents that were adopted in the last 12 to 18 months. But related to how we reached out to the public, we did do mailings to every business and every residence within the city. The online survey was done in Spanish as well as English because according to census tract information and other demographic research that was done, that was the most common language other than English spoken in people's homes. And so we were actually kind of surprised that we didn't get any responses in Spanish because it was advertised in Spanish as well as an invitation to participate. Other than that, it was our city's website. It was the city's newsletter, as ways that we tried to reach out. And then the study sessions and the planning commission meetings that were had throughout last year were the best that we could do given our limitations on in-person communication and the no public events like farmers markets or things like that during the summer.
That early on in the process, there were some focus groups put together.
Correct.
What was the diversity inside those groups?
We had the representative from the neighborhood association there. We had other developers there, and I believe we had at least one, if not two other citizen residents who came. As far as who was physically in the room and what their racial or ethnic background was, I couldn't tell you. It was last February. The majority were white, but that's to be expected, I think, given who was invited. It was developers, it was agency representatives, it was utility representatives, and then it was members from the public invited.
Okay, I guess that I would, for purposes of discussion with the rest of the council, that saying that we did a survey in Spanish and no one answered, and accepting that we checked that block doesn't necessarily seem to me, but if we made some actual contact with minority-owned businesses in the city, in the district, and things to do that, I'm more comfortable that we met what got a statement we're planning to approve about our focus of looking at making sure that we consider equity issues in planning. Those are the only questions I have of a general nature for Ms. Spear, Ms. Deputy Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Ms. Walker has her hand up to perhaps give us some good guidance.
Well, I wanted to clarify that one of the most frustrating pieces of these kinds of process is that legally, what you're bound to do is a prescribed process in order to do outreach. So in other words, you do the mailers, you do the things on the website and so on and so forth. You may or may not get responses, but you follow sort of the recipe as opposed to tailoring your outreach for each specific process, because then it starts to look like you do outreach until you get the outcome that you want.
You can't.
You are not getting the responses that you want. You want to do a more systemic cure going forward. You don't necessarily want to tease it out of the particular item that's in front of you now. Unless the council believes that the outreach was just truly inadequate in some fashion, you may need to look at your systems going forward rather than sidelining this one project here and now. Those are two separate things. Whether you're getting what you want is a different question than the legal process of, particularly when it comes to property things. There's a recipe for how you do it, and it's found in your code and in your processes.
Yeah, I appreciate that there. It's just that we're in an environment of where we're taking a closer look at the diversity, equity issues of processes now that we were, to the extent that we weren't doing it when we set up this process 18 months ago. And so that's the question of, in retrospect, do we like the process that we set up in the system, or are there some other aspects of it that we'd like to have seen or see? And I don't necessarily have any input that's come to me that indicates that any element of diversity is unhappy with what happened. I'm more concerned with, I can't see that we use the process that really intentionally went out to reach hard to find people. But thank you, and I think that I was in agreement with what you said in terms of the way that we certainly have operated in the past.
Well, thank you. Those are all the questions, unless there are more that council members appear to have for Ms. Spear. I have a quick question for you, Ms. Spear, with regard to the legislature's pending passage of the 20-year MFTA. So the session ends when, April 30th?
April 25th, so this coming Sunday.
So if we were to pass this tonight in its present form, we likely could turn around and do an amendment, or would have to, on that issue alone. Is that right?
Regardless of whether you pass this tonight or not, there will be a review of the MFTE bill in relation to the citywide code later this year. So whether it results in a change to any of the specific language within the plan itself, I couldn't tell you.
Right.
It's more likely to affect the citywide Title 18A and then that map that shows where the residential target areas are.
So it'd be a broad amendment across the city code then at that point?
Correct.
Okay, got it. All right, well, the ordinance number 751 is on our docket tonight. I will ask if there is a motion to adopt ordinance 751 at this time.
So moved.
Been moved by Councilmember Brandstetter. Do we have a second to adopt ordinance 751? Okay. Is there a second to the motion to adopt ordinance 751? If not, then the motion fails. And we move to ordinance 752.
No, I'm going to, Deputy Mayor, I'm going to move that we move ordinance 752, or excuse me, ordinance 751 to a hearing on the date of May, whatever the first Monday in May is.
Okay, so I need a little procedural help here, Ms. Walker. So we had a motion to adopt the ordinance that was not seconded.
The motion failed, correct.
Right. So the motion failed, so I adequately called that. Mr. Boki is then requested to move consideration of ordinance 751 to a later date. Is that acceptable at this time?
Yes, that is a motion to postpone to a definite date. That is a motion that requires a second.
And what's the definite date again, Mr. Boki?
Monday, May 3rd for y'all. I don't know that I don't think I'll be on the call.
Well, thank you.
That is mere coincidence.
Yes, it's been moved by Councilmember Boki to postpone ordinance number 751, consideration to a definite date, which is suggested to be May 3rd, 2021. Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Councilmember Brandstetter. Mr. Boki, you wish to speak to your motion?
No, I think this gives us time, if we need to talk about it at study session next week and nail down the amendments. I want to understand the amendments better. I think Mr. Brandstetter also has several amendments. So I think personally, I need time to digest that and match those up to the some of the objections that were raised.
Is there any further discussion on Mr. Boki's motion to postpone ordinance 751 to the definite date of May 3rd with consideration, it sounds like, of a study session in the intervening week? Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. So I assume, Mr. Boki, we move now to ordinance number 752. Ms. Spear, do you have further comment on that before Mr. Boki makes a similar motion?
I might not.
You heard the summary of what was presented to you really covers both of those ordinances, so nothing further.
Thank you. We have a motion to adopt ordinance 752 or to postpone.
I will move to postpone consideration of ordinance 752 until May 3rd.
Second.
Been moved by Mr. Brandstetter, seconded by Ms. Farmer, that we postpone consideration of ordinance 752 to a definite date, that being May 3rd. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. Mr. Caulfield, reading between the lines here, do we have time to consider some further contemplation at a study session before May 3rd?
Yes, what would the council like to have on April 26th?
So it sounds like, council, you would like to have further consideration of specifically the amendments as they relate to the original ordinance and the planned action ordinance, along with Mr. Brandstetter's proposed amendments. Is that helpful, Mr. Caulfield? And
Certainly we can
narrow.
The note that I took was we can simply list out those amendments for the meeting on the 26th and do a walkthrough, talk through.
That would be
Sure.
fine. And the other thing that might be helpful to me or the mayor when he gets back is just then making sure on the process side that we kind of follow Ms. Walker's guidance on that. So if it's to go through past the ordinance and then go through each one of those amendments that we discussed thoroughly at the study session, that's what I hear to be the right process.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Does that work for everyone?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, very good. As always, Tiffany, thank you for your very thorough presentation. We do appreciate it. We may appear perplexed on occasion, but we'll get there.
Thank you.
Okay, we now turn to resolution 2021-04. And I just want to comment before I ask for a motion one way or the other on that, that we do have the resolution 2025-05, which was the adoption of a statement on equity that we discussed at the last council meeting. So Ms. Walker, before I ask for a motion one way or the other, this is the earlier proposed joint resolution that we discussed some time ago, correct, with the school district?
That is correct. 04 is the joint statement that was to come forward between the city and the Clover Park School District. That was the hand-in-hand partnership done together. You did not have a subcommittee on that one.
Right.
05, which immediately follows on the agenda, is the one we discussed last week. It is the statement of this body. It is the one that this body spent extra time on. So the first one, 04, is the partnership. The second one, 05, is your specific statement.
Got it. So if council elected to proceed to the specific statement, procedurally, we could either not have a motion or a second on 04 rather, and just proceed to 05. So I'll call the question. Is there anyone who wishes to move adoption of resolution 2024-04 at this time? Motion fails, and so we turn to resolution 2021-05. Madam Clerk.
Resolution number 2021-05, adopting a statement on equity.
Okay, so as Ms. Walker indicated, this is the resolution that we chatted about last week. The subcommittee did meet and provided some edits to what you saw earlier in your packet. I don't know if it's in our packet or it came in a subsequent email. I think it came in a subsequent email. So if you want to pull that for review and consideration, and I will just give you an overview that, if I can find it.
It came in at 3:48 this afternoon. It was forwarded to you by the city manager at that time.
Got it. Okay, so I have it here. And if everyone can pull that up, there are two components of resolution 2025-05. One, of course, is the cover resolution, which seeks adoption of the statement on equity, which is attached to the subsequent exhibit A to that. So if you want to pull that up and take a look at it, I will tell you what we did, and then I'll ask and I'll call for the question. What we did as a subcommittee is basically change the active word in the bullet to make sure that they were all, active verbs, instilling, enacting, ensuring, identifying, that kind of thing. And then in the latter portion of the statement, reorganized the discussion to talk about the critical role we play, the fact that we won't tolerate intolerance, making the statement that it's unconscionable that members of our community fall victim to acts of hate, and then defining those acts of hate based on race, creed, ancestry, disability, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, and or social economic status are unwelcomed in Lakewood. The police department shall be vigilant in its investigation and prosecution of crimes of hate, which frankly may be a little bit of a distinction, right, between acts of hate and those that are crimes under the criminal code. And then with the concluding paragraph that we thought embodied everything we were trying to say. So those were the changes we made. If council members Bell or Farmer have anything to add as members of the subcommittee, feel free to do so.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, is it possible that could be screen shared? And while I can pull it up, members of the public watching it on YouTube Live or later looking at it YouTube could see what's different than from what was in the agenda packet?
Excellent point. If Ms. Schumacher can do that, that would be great. And maybe just enlarge your screen there, Brianna, if you can. because I've learned over the course of time that I now have to have 2 pairs of reading glasses, one that's really strong and one that's not as strong.
So is that large enough?
Yeah, you might open the screen so it's a full screen if you can there at the top on the right. Or maybe that's it. There you go. Yep, perfect. And then widen it so we can read it all.
And so this does not have a track change, but this would be the
This is the current version. Yes,
Correct.
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Branstad, for pointing that out. So again, the changes, I don't have the draft one in front of me that we marked up, but we just made sure that those are all action verbs in the bullet point comments to make them consistent. I think we, instead of ensure, we said ensuring equity in municipal planning. And then we reoriented the paragraphs below the bullet comments as you see them.
We also took out the word malignance, deliberate malignance. I believe that was the right word. And we just changed it to fall victims to acts of hate.
Correct. And then
Just simplified it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
So I'll let you all take a read there.
We also took out the word policy in relation to the Lakewood Police Department.
Mm-hmm.
Because policy speaks to a very specific thing, and this isn't a policy, and so we chose vigilant instead.
Yeah, I appreciate the improvements. I really do. I think you guys did a nice job. So do we have to substitute this?
This
by an
is
amendment?
No, this is the resolution before the council for tonight.
Okay, it is.
Yep.
So the one we received in our packet, we're just ignoring.
Well, I'll ask the parliamentarian. I don't think we're ignoring it.
Yeah.
I think we're taking this as an amended version of 2025-05.
Correct. And the resolution that the council is adopting is the one to make the statement.
Correct.
And what the mayor has offered is that this is the statement.
Okay, great.
As long as the council is all looking at the email version that came out at 3:48 this afternoon and not at the one in the packet, so long as you're all voting on that as the statement that's part of the resolution, you're fine.
Good.
Are there any further questions of council on, again, the resolution 2025-05, the form and substance of which did not change, but the Exhibit A statement is the one that we edited and provided for you on your screen tonight? If not, do I have a motion to adopt the resolution?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It has been moved by, I believe, Councilmember Bell, seconded by Councilmember Farmer, that we adopt the resolution. Of course, I've lost my place. Is it 2021-05? Is there any further discussion? Mr. Boki.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really do like this. I think it's very well done. I think as a group, we crafted it, and the improvements that the committee made are also it improved it further. I really do actually look forward to, and I like data and whatnot, that when we get our person on board here for DEI, that we really do take a look at the most recent census information that probably at the block and the census tract level probably won't be out till next year, but that we really take a look at figure out what we do from a standpoint of diversity and equity in our community, and really taking a look at what our situation is from an income standpoint, and from an ethnic diversity standpoint, and a race diversity standpoint, and really get an idea of how our city looks rather than basing it upon what we believe it looks like. So and what neighborhoods, what certain neighborhoods look like or don't look like, we'll actually know by the numbers. And so, and really informing our decisions as we go forward, especially when it comes to providing services and providing capital improvements.
Thank you. Mr. Brandstetter?
Yeah, I would also like to commend the committee for finalizing the document, but all of us and the staff that helped us with this, I would note that we've got a statement that varies from the statements that some other jurisdictions have made, in that it's very forward-looking, and it looks at what we're going to do and what we're committed to going forward, without a lot of lamentations about the past. And I think that's actually consistent with our yearly theme of unity in this, our 25th anniversary year.
Well, thank you for that. Any further comments? I also think it's important to be forward-looking and inclusive. And I think we added some terms like social economic status, which I think is important because we talk about that a lot here in Lakewood, how we're a very diverse community, both economically, culturally, and socially, certainly. And so I appreciate the forward thinking on all of that. All right, without further ado, all those in favor of adoption, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Resolution 2025-05, Lakewood's adoption of a statement on equity has passed unanimously. Congratulations. We now turn to resolution 2021-06. Madam Clerk.
Resolution number 2021-06, adopting the Region 5 All Hazard Mitigation Plan 2020 through 2025 edition and the 2021 addendum to the Region 5 Hazard Mitigation Plan.
Thank you. And for this, I call on Assistant Chief John Unfred for some background information before we move adoption.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor, Council. I bring to you the resolution approving the Lakewood addendum to the Pierce County Region 5 Hazard Mitigation Plan. As you recall, I presented the highlights of this last week. This plan, a little bit delayed due to COVID, but has been approved by State Emergency Management Division, as well as FEMA Region 10. The final step in the approval process is for this body to approve a resolution adopting this plan formally. This plan is a 5-year plan. It is one of the family plans that is required by FEMA in order to be eligible for public assistance. And I would support passing this resolution and be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Chief. Do we have any questions? We had a very thorough review last time. Thank you, Assistant Chief Unfred, for your very, very thorough presentation. If there are no additional questions of the Assistant Chief, I will ask for a motion to adopt Resolution 2021-06.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Councilmember Farmer and seconded by Councilmember Boki that we adopt Resolution 2021-06. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution is adopted. We now turn to unfinished business. Any unfinished business, Mr. Caulfield?
There is none, Deputy Mayor.
New business. It appears we have the review of the Community Development Block Grant CARES Act CDBG CV2 funding. For this, we have Mr. Gum.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor, members of the council. Again, I'm before you talking about CARES Act funds. This is the third of three. We've had discussions on CDBG CV1 funds, CV2 or 3 funds. So this is concerning CV2 funds. Initially, the funds on CV2 went to large municipalities and lost the term here, counties. So the city did not receive a direct allocation of CV2 funds, but after the state has kind of worked their budget and put things together, they've decided to move some of those funds back out to local jurisdictions. So on April 1st, they notified local jurisdictions and CDBG entitlement communities of a $15 million allocation that was being pushed down to them. They would be available to apply for it. It does have a short timeline. So we learned of it about a week and a half ago, and on April 30th is the deadline to submit the application to Commerce to receive those funds. So the funding that's available to the city of Lakewood is $136,706. Not a huge pot of funds, but combined with the CDBG CV1 and CV3 funds, we would have about $940,000 received in those funds all told. But the CDBG CV2 funds are, again, they're the same uses, the same types of eligible activities as before. The primary goal of CV funds are to respond to the effects of the coronavirus, specifically the effects of the coronavirus on low income populations. So with these funds, again, they can be used to fund the primary CDBG activities. So you can fund public service activities, housing related activities, public improvements in facilities, real property acquisition, economic development activities, and then general administration and planning activities to carry out whatever is funded. Typical and common uses of the CDBG CV funds so far, and they're consistent with what the city of Lakewood has done, would be microenterprise assistance. So assistance in the form of grants or loans to micro enterprises, so businesses of 5 or fewer employees. Service type activities could be funded. Those would be things like legal services, homeless services, health related, food banks, those types of things. Public facilities, those are things like the homeless shelters, homeless facilities, senior centers, those kinds of things if they're serving low income populations. And then planning and administration, obviously to carry out those activities is a typical funding for most jurisdictions. So what staff is recommending, and it does take into account kind of what we've done so far with CDBG 1 or CV1 and 3. Those funding sources focused primarily on business assistance with CV1. The funds that were left over, council reallocated those to the rental and mortgage assistance program. So right now we have an ongoing rental and mortgage assistance program. We've done business assistance. So we were looking to kind of do something different with this and fund a service type activity. So LASA had approached the city last year to expand some of their facilities. They wanted to do some laundry services, an additional access change, kind of changing how the facilities are used, where people can enter the facilities. So they wanted to add a doorway on the west side of their building to kind of limit where people can go into and out of, and still get access to laundry services and health services and bathroom facilities and some of that stuff, so they could use the facilities a little bit better. So the proposal would be to fund LASA in that capacity. So it would be $121,706 allocation is what staff is proposing to fund to LASA for those specific things. It's a little bit higher than the allocation amount's a little bit higher than what LASA's original numbers were, because when LASA did their initial plans and review, they didn't take into account CDBG rules and regulations and some of those things. So there's some Davis-Bacon funding requirements, prevailing wage and so forth that would be involved in this process. So we are anticipating the costs would be a little bit higher. a lion's share of the increased cost would simply just be the construction cost increases over the past year and a half. It's amazing what COVID-19 has done to lumber prices. We're seeing on some of the smaller projects we do lumber costs that are almost 4 times what they were a year ago. So construction costs are going to be more for LASA to do this. So we were taking that into account. The additional funding would be a $15,000 administration to monitor the project, to get it done, to bring it into compliance with federal regulations for construction and so forth. And then proposal would be any funding that was left over from the construction. We could have an alternate funding source to spend those on LASA providing services at the facility. So they do things for providing services to the low income. They provide rental assistance. They provide utility assistance. They do all kinds of things. They provide services, care people that provide all kinds of facility or services in the facility for people to get their social security in order. They have many clients who don't necessarily have all of their income streams that they could possibly have. So they help them to get those. They help them get into safe housing and move from one housing unit to another. There's all kinds that LASA does. So the alternative would be to spend any funds that were left over from the construction and administration on LASA services. The timeline on this, as I mentioned, is kind of tight. Again, we started in April 1st. There's a 5-day public comment period that's required for these funds. So we have to, being a new service that we would be providing, we have to provide a 5-day comment period that is set, and it's ongoing now, April 16th through April 22nd. In that 5-day comment period, we have to have a public hearing. That is being accomplished on April 21st, this Wednesday, through the Community Services Advisory Board. We've sent a notification out in the TNT. We posted it on the website and have done typically what we would do for public hearings. Once that is done, it would be submitted to Commerce on April 30th, the application for the funds. If those are then approved, which if everything is timely and so forth, it's mostly an administrative process at that point. If they are approved, then we would expect to sign a contract in May, probably realistically towards the end of May. And then those funds can be used by the city. They have to be completed and fully expended by June 30th, 2023. So the construction timeline for this would be about a year and a half, somewhere in that timeline to complete the project. So with that, does council have any questions or any thoughts?
I do, and I'll open it up. But Mr. Gum, I've heard about this project because I think LASA came to Rotary to discuss it as a potential option for Rotary. Do they have a decent set of plans yet on this, or is it just an idea still? Do they have a set of architectural drawings on that? This is for the laundry facility, right, and the reorientation of a potential shower?
It is. They've been working with an architect who's got, I won't say it's a great set of plans, but they have a rudimentary set of plans that could be kind of brushed up and made viable fairly quickly.
And they have to pass this through you at some point to make sure it complies and it's going to be done.
Yes. All of the contracting would be done through the City of Lakewood CDBG department. So we put that together for them.
That makes me more comfortable. Mr. Brandstetter and then Ms. Farmer.
Well, yeah, thank you, thank you, Mr. Gum. I think this is an exceptionally good use of this money given its amount, and is the recommendation is a way to make it impactful. One of our challenges with dealing with homelessness that the public always asks us to do is, what do you do that the homeless themselves will actually take advantage of? And anecdotally, talking with folks who are in that demographic of doing that, the exact sort of things that the physical things that are become available to take advantage of are on the list of what homeless people say, if only there was nearby. And so, you know, I think that we, in partnership with LASA, are on the verge of doing something impactful for those folks.
Ms. Farmer?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor and Mr. Gum. So if I understand correctly, because I haven't seen the actual proposal, this is, the money would be used on physical construction to expand or relocate laundry and showers
Yes.
at their current location. Okay. And do they have an estimate on how many more people this might help?
They do. I would have to get that and bring that back to you, but I don't remember the number off the top of my head.
And is their physical location co-located, and I can't think of the right word, but with the homeless population, is it easily accessible by those people who would need to use it?
Yeah, losses on Gravelly Lake Drive, and based on where we've seen on the one night count and so forth, where most of the homeless populations are, it's would be a very easy access for them.
Okay. And is this the only project you're considering for these monies?
It is right now, only because it's kind of, I won't say it's shovel ready, but it's one of the closest shovel ready projects that I think we could probably throw this in and meet the timeline.
Sounded like it might need some brushing up.
Yeah, I mean, some of the architectural drawings and so forth have to be finished, and then we have to go through the bidding process. But that's something that we're consistent with doing with our CDBG staff. Myself and Martha Larkin are good at getting that stuff done and bringing it to fruition. So she would be taking the lead on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boki, and then Ms. Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Gum, help me out. I guess I'm a little confused. It says funds would be used to remodel and reorient laundry facilities and bathroom access along the W elevation away from the facility's main entrance to provide access. So are there already laundry facilities?
There's a place for laundry facilities, but they were never formally finished. So there's a closet basically where they were supposed to go in, and that's what we're looking to remodel.
So this was part of the original plan, actually, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah, okay. So and then the bathroom is there also?
Yes, there's also a plan to potentially expand bathroom facilities. They had a recent water event in that building, and they've kind of cleared out an area that they want to remodel and change a little bit of a footprint on the bathroom and the laundry facilities as well. So
what is the W elevation?
West, on the west elevation.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So if you look at the building,
I'm sitting here just like, what W elevation? What am I missing? Street, like
you're missing a compass.
West elevation. Okay.
Yeah, I'm used to drawing up construction documents, and we just throw that out there.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Councilmember Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Mr. Gum, do you have a count of the number of homeless people that we are talking about?
In the city of Lakewood, I can get that number from the homeless count. I do remember it being in the 40s.
Really?
Yeah, it's actually grew from last year. It's interesting. We had a couple of year decline, and then last year it went up a little bit. So
yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
Very good. Any additional questions for Mr. Gum? Thank you, Mr. Gum. I think it would be kind of interesting once you get deeper into that process with LASA, just to come back and give us an update down the road, because it is a project that has some significant interest. We do get a lot of community feedback. I know I do individually, and I'm sure others do, about what we're doing for the homeless. And that's a very tangible thing that we can say provides a significant resource for them. And it's one that good location because we put $6 million of love into the LASA facility some years ago, and now we're looking to help them expand, and this will be good. So
yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, LASA's Lakewood's homeless facility. It's what we have. So I think that's a great point, and I would be happy to do that.
And I think just on this point, while we're here, Mr. Caulfield, we look to be pretty successful in our legislative ask for LASA of the $500,000 for the land acquisition. Is that right?
Actually, Deputy Mayor, the request was to further expand this client services center that Mr. Gum was talking about just a little bit ago. And the latest update actually hasn't changed. It's included, if I recall, it's included in the House capital budget, but not the Senate, or it could be vice versa. So we'll know in the next few days whether or not through the proverbial reconciliation process, if state capital budget monies will be appropriated. So
Great.
more to follow on that.
Very good. Well, you're on deck next. Now we turn to reports by the city manager.
Well, good evening, Deputy Mayor and council members. I'd like to first start off with 3 items. First on, I'm going to call upon our SSMCP program manager, Colonel Retired Bill Adamson, to give you an update on the 2021 South Sound Military Community Partnership Work Plan. This will then be followed by Ms. Kraus, our Assistant City Manager and CFO, to provide you a snapshot on something that's required annually, which is our Transportation Benefit District Annual Report. And then I would like to call upon our Strategic Planning Manager, Tiffany Spear, to give you, to review with you real quick, a follow-up letter that we have prepared to the South Sound Housing Affordability Partners, or SHAPE. And this is a follow-up to a conversation that the council had a couple of weeks ago regarding SHAPE's request to provide feedback and input on their draft ILA that would form that organization. And so we want to make sure that we haven't missed anything there. So first up, if the city clerk, Ms. Schumacher, if you could please call upon Colonel Retired Bill Adamson, please.
So thanks, Mr. Caulfield. It's Bill Adamson from SSMCP. I think I'm going to have to share my screen. I think Ms. Schumacher has made that possible for me. SSMCP operates South Sound Military and Communities Partnership, SSMCP, operates off of a 2-year work plan. What you see on the left side of your screen are some of the key accomplishments from the 2019-2020 work plan. And then on the right-hand side is the plan that was approved last fall by our steering committee, which is chaired by Mr. Caulfield. And then later in November, was approved by our elected officials council, which the Mayor Anderson chairs in November. So I thought it might be interesting for you to see the kinds of things that we accomplished in the 2020 plan, not the least of which was 3 grant studies. OEA, Office of Economic Adjustment, has been around since the creation of SSMCP back in 2010, 2011. It was renamed to the Office of Local Defense Community Cooperation, or old CC, this past year in the NDAA. The 3 tasks we took on last year are noted there. A lot of good work on transportation impacts having to do with access and egress from JBLM on the road networks, not I-5, but on the road networks that are around JBLM and where people mostly travel. And task 2 is to look at housing for lower enlisted. As you all are quite aware, real estate appreciation is outpacing the salaries of our younger enlisted, causing them to move farther and farther out. And sometimes it's an issue of knowing what's available. And that was more of a process thing that we learned over on task 2. And then task 3 was dealing with training and operations on JBLM, mostly in Thurston County, but in the city of Roy, there's a Mazama pocket gopher that lives out there. And these 3 endangered species impacted JBLM's ability to do training and operations. So we looked at that. A second big thing that we accomplished was in collaboration with UW-Tacoma's Center for Business Analytics, was a JBLM regional economic impact analysis. And in that, we were able to find out that across the state, JBLM has an impact of $14 billion. In the South Sound, which we classify Pierce and Thurston County, it's $12.1 billion. And it's also responsible for what we call 34,000 economic spin-off jobs. Those are civilian jobs that are off base that would otherwise not be here if it weren't for the presence of JBLM. Of those 34,000 statewide jobs, 25,500 are in Pierce and Thurston County. So they are, it's the #1 employer in Pierce County, but it's a significant employer across the civilian population as well. Simultaneously to this economic impact analysis, we also did a business survey. Got a lot of good data out of that. What we've been spending a lot of time on here recently is the 2021 legislative agenda. That was once again voted on by our steering committee last September and approved in November by our elected officials council. You can see that we in 2019 actually stood up the Defense Community Compatibility Account that was championed by Senator Steve Conway of the 29th District. We were able to get $80,000 of program funding so that they could have a program manager run this new account. We obtained some additional clear zone funding. I could spend hours on the clear zone, but Mr. Caulfield wouldn't let me do that. We continue to make progress on the clear zone, and we've advocated for I-5 highway improvements. And I'll tell you, as we sit here today on the I-5 piece, the House has put our full $204 million request in its transportation package. The Senate has put in $7.5 million specifically for the Nisqually Delta alternative design study. Obviously, they're going through negotiations right now. We're not quite sure how that ends up. But both of those projects will require a transportation revenue package to be approved by this coming Sunday. So we're not quite sure if we're going to have total success or not, but things were looking positive. In the 2021-2022 work plan priorities, you see a couple of bolded areas, which I'll spend my time on, but the top 2 are rather significant as well. Child care initiatives have been a continuing problem, especially with COVID-19 over the last year, and especially for the military community, because many of the on-base child care facilities had to reduce their operations because of the actual virus being spread and new regulations that were put into place. With that, we're going to take a harder look at child care initiatives. Given that we completed a housing study in 2020, we wanted to take a look at this more formally and set up a work group focused on attainable housing for lower enlisted. But our current thinking is, and this gets to bullet 3, which is really the driver for much of the work we're going to be doing in the next year, is that we should hold off on forming a formal work group until we get completion on a new growth coordination plan. And just as background, back when joint basing was being conceived in about 2008, 9, and 10, Department of Defense funded a 2010 growth coordination plan, and out of that, SSMCP was born under Lakewood's leadership. We've been operating off that plan now for better than a decade, and the leadership in SSMCP thought it was a good time to take a look at how relevant all of those continued objectives that we established in 2010 are, and should we come up with new ones? So we're in the process of updating that now. It's due to be published in March of 2022. And that's taken quite a bit of our workload there on that particular task. One that's near and dear to Lakewood is the fourth bullet, securing additional federal and state funding and modifying and managing the cooperative agreement which Lakewood signed with the Army back in September of 2019. Although we don't have a commitment, we have a planned use of $80 million, federal dollars, to go toward the acquisition of properties in the North Clear Zone on the north end of McCord Air Force Base. We've been in the process of acquiring our first major property for better than a year now. We hope to close that out this summer. We had also requested additional monies from the state to go into this new account I mentioned, the Defense Community Compatibility Account. State legislators have decided not to fund that account, so it's an account that has no money. But what we're trying to do now, Senator Conway is putting a $1.4 million ask from SSMCP into a revised version of the state capital budget. We'll see if that survives contact in the next week. But we could be getting the money that we had originally requested in DCCA directly from the state capital budget. More to follow on that. Down near the bottom, second bullet from the bottom, we spend a lot of times educating our stakeholders on the impacts of the military. One of the biggest things was this regional economic impact analysis, and we've really got to use that as a marketing tool across the region. The people north of us here in King County and Seattle just don't have a good appreciation for how important JBLM is to the economic vitality of Pierce and Thurston County. And same thing as we educate our state legislators on our priorities. We're doing a lot of work this year with the Nisqually Indian tribe because they're very invested in the I-5 crossing of the Nisqually Delta area. It's a multi-functional problem we've got there that spans, traffic congestion to salmon habitat degradation to food for the southern resident killer whale, climate change, sea level rise, I mean, you name it. And we had a USGS study completed that found all these things are going to start happening real soon. I-5 will be routinely overtopped by floods in the future. In as little as 17 years, this will start. So by that, I mean, take a look at what happened in '96 at the Chehalis flood. That'll be happening up here in the Nisqually Delta in about 17 years. And what used to be termed the 100-year flood is going to be a flood that occurs about every 22 years. So it's a problem that needs to be addressed. So the process for us was we put this in front of our steering committee. It's approved at our steering committee retreat, which is typically held in September, and then to our elected officials council. And now we're basically just informing you of all the things that have happened. Unless I have any questions, I'll turn it back over to Mr. Caulfield.
Any questions of Mr. Adamson? A lot of good work. Kind of nice to see the fruition of our I-5 JBLM improvement money is actually coming to bear now. It's amazing. Mr. Coffey and I took a little tour over some of the overpasses, and it really, I mean, it's amazing the work that's been done in the last couple of years. Wouldn't have happened without Mr. Adamson and SMCP and all the great work that they did to get a lot of those plans developed and run up the flagpole to get the legislative money, both state and federal. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good evening. Next up, I'd like to call upon our Assistant City Manager and CFO, Ms. Kraus, to provide the annual TBD report. Ms. Kraus?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. This is the annual TBD report for fiscal year 2020. We are by state law to issue an annual report talking about the status of the transportation improvement projects, the expenditures, the revenues, construction schedules to the public and to you. So this is the report. It's not a very extensive report. We've had 2 projects that received funding for from the Transportation Benefit District. So for 2020, we had received $882,000 in TBD revenues. Those monies went to the chip seal program and the JBLM North Access project. So at the end of December 31st, 2020, we had $688,000 left in the fund. If you recall, as part of the 21 and 22 budget, we allocated what we anticipated the balance would be of $640,000 to minor capital and major maintenance, as well as the chip seal programs, which then brought up the budgets for each of the year 21 and 22, $260,000 for minor capital and chip seal at $380,000 per year. So the chip seal program in 2020 had funding sources of $361,000 plus the carryover of $84,000 from the prior year, and the capital expenditures were $446,000. So we sent all of the funds for TBD. And in your packet, you'll see some before and after pictures. Some great improvements were made. And then we also had some funding of $195,000 for the JBLM North Access improvements. The total revenues and expenditures were about $1.6 million on the revenue side and $1.6 million on the expenditure side, leaving a balance of about $210,000. So we don't have any pictures of that project because it's still in progress. So really that concludes my presentation of the 2020 TBD annual report.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Thank you, Ms. Kraus.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kraus. Next up, I'd like to call upon our strategic planning manager, Tiffany Spear, to review with you the draft letter that we have prepared in response to the comments specific to the draft ILA that SHAPE sent over to us in late March. And I don't know if Ms. Spear, if you can share your screen with the letter or not, but I know I did email it out to the mayor and council. Ms. Spear.
Thank you, Mr. Manager, and I will share my screen. This was emailed to the City Council last Friday afternoon, but I will bring it up for everyone's reference right now. So this is due by the 23rd. That's the date. It is directed toward the co-chairs of SHAPE, which is County Executive Bruce Dameyer and Mayor of Tacoma Victoria Woodards. It's being submitted via the facilitator for SHAPE. And if you recall your discussion of SHAPE several meetings ago during your study session, there were several items that you requested be included in this communication. So the first item here is talking about a request for at least 60% or 14 of the jurisdictions within Pierce County to sign on to SHAPE before it would become an official group. And the intention there is to make sure that it is truly countywide. The second item is talking about the duration of the agreement. The way the original draft came to the city for consideration, it was something that once signed would automatically renew unless and until the group decided to disband, essentially. This is actually turning that around and saying that while the original signatures would let it last for 2 years, come up to the end of 2023, SHAPE's executive board and body would have to re-decide whether they wanted to renew it. So it would become every 2 years a substantive discussion about the success of the group and where it's headed. And also whether any budgeting or operational changes would be appropriate at that time. The third item talks about the termination of the agreement, and at the way it is drafted originally, it said that termination would occur at any time by an affirmative vote of the majority of bodies involved. The letter is suggesting on behalf of the council that some specific language be included as to reasons why the termination might also happen. These wouldn't be the only reasons, but these would be specifically named. First, when action items included in the work plan were not accomplished within their time frame. B would be if the budget available through member contributions was inadequate to support the annual work plan and/or staffing. So those three items were enunciated in this draft, and just looking for your approval or further edit direction before this gets submitted by the end of this week.
Comments, questions? Seeing none, it looks like by affirmation you have consensus to proceed.
All right, thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. This will get submitted by the city by the end of this week. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Spear. Well, I have a few more updates, Deputy Mayor, if that's okay.
Sure.
First off, I think it was mentioned earlier, the state legislature is in their kind of the home stretch of their session. We aren't hearing any rumblings that there's going to be an extension beyond this Sunday, April 25th, though that always is a possibility. Overall, we're doing pretty well in terms of our key priorities, both from a policy standpoint as well as our capital budget requests. And so we'll know more, in terms of what's final here later on in the week and early next week. We've also scheduled for a comprehensive report on the session as part of your May 24th study session, in terms of what the outcome of the session and what the impact is specifically to Lakewood. A couple of emerging items. It does look like that, a transportation revenue package right now seems unlikely. There seems to be a lot of uncertainty around it, particularly around the funding mechanisms. There have been a couple of proposals introduced, but given the amount of time left at this point in time, it would seem perhaps highly unlikely that there would be a package. But again, that could change in the next few days, or they could continue the session or have a special session. Also, one of the emerging items has to do with the state Supreme Court's Blake decision. And, this body actually addressed that a couple of weeks ago by passing an ordinance making the possession of uncontrolled substances a gross misdemeanor. The Senate passed a bill very, very similar to that, 5476 late last week. Our city attorney, Heidi Wachner, testified in support of that today, and she continues to work with a small group along with AWC taking the lead, representing cities on that particular issue. We understand the House has also introduced a bill. Don't know if it's going to get a hearing here in the next few days or not. But their bill is a little different from the Senate's bill in that their bill from a process standpoint makes an uncontrolled substance an infraction as opposed to a misdemeanor. And then previously under state law, before the state Supreme Court overruled it, it was actually a felony. One of the concerns that AWC has, as it represents 281 cities and towns, is that under both of these bills, all of these cases would then be processed through city municipal courts, either directly or via contract. And so what's the financial impact on that? And so AWC is again, and Ms. Wachner is a part of this, is working to try and have that addressed in terms of what type of financing support can the state legislature provide to our municipal courts. I think as we've discussed a couple of weeks ago, here in Lakewood, would it have an impact? Yes, but we do believe it's fairly limited. We're looking at maybe on average 100 cases a year. That's been the typical number in the past. But again, just wanted to give you an update on that, and things they continue to move there. On Saturday and Sunday, we had our annual spring cleanup. The good news, it was once again very, very, very successful. Had a lot of people show up. The not so good news is the lines were long. It was a long wait. One of the things we learned about halfway through Saturday morning is that unfortunately Waste Connections, to comply with the COVID restrictions and such, they only had 4 of the lanes open at the ramp where the garbage is dumped, whereas in the past, they would allow for 8, or even, they could squeeze in 10 vehicles up there. So we do think that was, pretty much a driving cause of why there was a backup of vehicles. not just down 94th, but South Tacoma Way, and then even onto Steilacoom Boulevard. So we're going to have a bit of a debrief with Waste Connections. I know we're trying to set some time this week to talk with them. One of the things on Saturday, I was out there all day on Saturday and talking to the person who was in charge. I asked him, I said, does it seem like there were more vehicles coming through? And he said, no. I said, it was about the same amount of vehicles or even less. And he also pointed out, and again, we don't have the final numbers yet, but he did point out that on Saturday, they only pulled away about 4 truck full of, the big semis of garbage, whereas on the typical Saturday in the spring cleanups, they would pull away about 6. And again, because of the COVID restrictions, they had a limited number of, vehicles that they were able to unload at a time. So one of the things I want to talk with them about is, would they be willing to do, another, maybe another special day later this summer or even spring, given that they didn't pick up the same amount of trash as they have in the past, or maybe doing something post-COVID. We also have our fall event that is scheduled. That typically usually occurs the end of October, early November, but we want to try and see if maybe they would be willing to accommodate another one here again, maybe later this spring or early this summer. So more to follow on that. Also, we had some conversations with one of the larger adjoining property owners, Mr. Buhan, Jay Buhan, and he actually offered a portion of his property to help for vehicles to be able to meander through part of the cleanup to maybe alleviate some congestion on some of the roads. So that was very kind of him to do that. So we're going to communicate that to Waste Connections as well. So I hope to have some more information here in the next couple of weeks for you on that in terms of some follow-up items. Also, I know Ms. Kraus was just on here. I'd really like to just thank and recognize her for her work. And that's indicative of the fact that the Government Finance Officers Association, a national organization, has recognized the city with their, again, another, I call the CAFR Award. Apparently they have renamed it to the Award on Financial Reporting of Achievement. We always get the Budget Award, which is that's also a fantastic recognition of the city's financial policies and how we do business. However, this award here is actually at a much higher level. Out of the 281 cities and towns in Washington state, only a handful get it, only a handful. And then nationally, out of the 19,000 cities, towns, and villages, again, the number of those agencies that get it are measured by a couple of thousand, maybe not even that. So it is a tremendous honor for the city to be recognized, and is a very, very positive reflection of Ms. Kraus and her staff. At the same time, it's also a very positive reflection of our department directors and how they allocate our not just our financial resources, but all of our resources. And then, of course, you as the mayor and the council in your policy decisions, it's also a very positive reflection there. So I'd also like to extend my congratulations to all of you on that as well. If you haven't been down to American Lake Park lately, the new shelter has been installed. It was installed about a week and a half ago or so. So they're finishing up some work actually around it. Actually, we've already had some inquiries about people wanting to rent it. It'll have access to water and power later this year in conjunction with the larger American Lake improvements that we hope to be able to bring forward for a contract for your review and consideration. You might recall that this shelter is actually funded primarily with a grant award from Pierce County, from actually our former Pierce County council member, Doug Richardson. It was one of the last acts he was able to do for us before he left office, and then a little bit of city monies to help finish and pull it together. But again, if you haven't been down there, it is installed. Let's see, on Saturday, this past Saturday, our human services team held a walkthrough career and employment resource fair over at Springbrook Park. This was done in partnership with Springbrook Connections, Pierce College, Clover Park Technical College, Career Team, Goodwell, as well as the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department, who all set up, some booths and had information about access to jobs and such. It was also done to coincide with St. Leo's mobile food truck distribution, which occurs down there several times a month. Attendance at the event, unfortunately, was a little lower than expected. It was about 25 people or so that came through, but those who came through were very, very appreciative of the work and the effort and the opportunity to learn about employment opportunities and how to get access to services there. On the federal front, we did submit to Congresswoman Strickland and her office our request for $2.4 million to complete that last section of South Tacoma Way, between 88th and 80th of the city's northern boundary. We also got a strong letter of support from the city of Tacoma. We're very, very appreciative of that because of that's really the last segment in South Tacoma Way. On the Tacoma side, they did their last improvements. You might recall if you've driven that corridor about 3 or 4 years ago. So this is really the last segment. We should know in the May or June timeframe whether or not this project will make the cut for funding at the federal level. Also at the federal level, a number of our key policies are moving forward. Our request for funding, transportation funding for medium-sized cities. We're working with a number of other cities here in Western Washington on that. Congressman Rick Larson is actually taking the lead on that. However, our Congresswoman Marilyn Strickland, as well as a number of others in our delegation, are strongly in support of that. And actually the city of Lakewood, going back a number of years, as well as this year, has actually been very actively involved in actually writing the legislative language. And we hope to see something shortly that will be presented to Congress. We're also looking to schedule some online virtual meetings with our federal delegation, perhaps the first week of May. And typically, as you know, we typically this time, well, it depends on the time of the year. We usually go back twice a year. But since we can't travel back to Washington, D.C., we're going to try and schedule some virtual meetings. And so at this point in time, it will be myself, our mayor, of course, our government relations contractor, Jake Johnson, and then, perhaps another council member or two would like to also sit in on those. So as we get those meetings nailed down, we'll be sure to keep you appraised of those. Also, the DCIP, the Defense Community Infrastructure Program, because of Lakewood, that program did have some significant changes that were made last year that would allow a city like Lakewood to apply for transportation funding. We are expecting OEA. It's actually, the agency's been renamed and is now called something else, which I have to relearn, and I haven't yet, so I'm continuing to call it OEA. They're expecting to come out with their rules and regulations, if you will, on this year's process. It's expected to come out hopefully by the end of April. A key component of that is getting a letter of support from JBLM. I already had some conversation actually on Friday morning with the folks at the Garrison headquarters about that. And so they're standing by, ready, willing, and able to do what they need to do to be able to support our application. Also on the federal front, we continue to try and make some headway in getting the money that's been allocated to us to acquire the Tactical Tailor property. And we continue to work on it. But we're now at a point where we have requested assistance from our congressional delegation. And so Congresswoman Strickland, at our request, is circulating a letter for signature to her colleagues, including Adam Smith, who is chair of the House Services Armed Services Committee. And so hopefully that will light the proverbial fire under the Army folks to be able to cut us our money so that we can close that deal. It's really, quite frankly, an issue of bureaucracy that we're trying to deal with. Also, in recent days, you might have heard that Pierce County, and I don't know what the number is because they're big numbers, millions of dollars. Pierce County made available for businesses for relief. How much is the council for? Is it 4 million? Oh, is it 4 million? Okay. $4 million available to businesses throughout Pierce County. And so our economic development team did send out a notice to as many businesses as we could here in Lakewood to make them aware that the funding was available. And if I recall, the maximum amount of funding that's available is about $10,000 or so. So we wanted to piggyback on that as soon as possible in the event there was a run for the money. And we wanted to make sure that our Lakewood businesses got in line sooner rather than later. So again, our economic development manager, Becky Newton, got on top of that relatively quickly about a week and a half ago or so. So with that, Deputy Mayor, that's my report.
I was on mute. Any questions for Mr. Caulfield? Thank you, sir. Lots of good information. Well, I think we've got another half hour or an hour. Didn't you have another report we wanted to go through? We'll go to council comments. Councilmember Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I would like to say congratulations to Ms. Kraus and her team. That's a wonderful job that they've done with our finances. So, and we appreciate you very much so. I can read the budget. I understand it. So good job. Briefly, a few weeks ago, I shared with you that the News Tribune had contacted me through my LMCC role to talk about diversity in the jury pool. That article ran yesterday in the TNT, and I hope you had an opportunity to take a look at it. It was well done. It was on the front page, actually. A lot of good information was shared. It's a great article. Lots of comments were made from a variety of different people, different organizations. Some good ideas and suggestions were made. I had a conversation today with Representative Levitt. That session ends this week, as you have said earlier, and she's open to working with us on the legislative piece. And her plans is to pull together some stakeholders and do some and include some of her colleagues to help talk about what we can do to help improve the diversity in the jury pool. So LMCC will be a stakeholder. We had a good conversation, and I'm excited that LMCC will play a role in that because it just seems to be a good fit for our program. So, so off we go. More to come, and I'll keep you up to date.
Thank you very much. Ms. Bell.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I was fortunate enough to be at the recycling event, and it was actually, I was in the first wave, so everyone was, you know, just waking up with their coffee. And I think it was a fabulous event. I know that there was some bumps and some hiccups, so I'm really excited to hear that there might be a possibility of doing a summer event and then again in the fall, and then taking a look and seeing what the improvements are there. So I think that's very exciting. It was well received, I think, by a majority, despite some of the other issues. I also was with Deputy Mayor Whalen at the Colonial Plaza walkthrough of the 6, I believe it was 6 artists, potential artists. And that's just such an exciting space. I can't wait to see what is going to happen there, what they're going to come back with. Next week, we will be interviewing all 6 and seeing what their proposals are, I believe, next Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So that'll be quite the process. And I also want to congratulate the Finance Department for the award. I think that's wonderful. And it's well-deserved, and it speaks very highly.
Well, thank you very much. Mr. Brandstetter.
Okay, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Well, I certainly share my appreciation of all the staff in the Finance Department and the leadership of Ms. Kraus there. But I was also really glad to see the email that was forwarded to us from the court administrator regarding the very positive comments about the Veterans Court and how that was viewed as being something that is being both exemplary, even amongst veterans courts, being able to go on to be able to go and do that. But that's all I have.
Thank you, Councilmember Farmer.
So I'll pile on to the congratulations for Ms. Kraus and her staff as well. Because it was par for the course when we were both at the City of Federal Way that this award would come around. And so I guess I kind of got used to it. But I was reminded by how important it was when reading the email from the city manager when there were not one, not two, not three, but 5 exclamation points in it. And so that was like, yeah, that's right. This is a super incredible big deal. So awesome. Very good. I very much appreciated the opportunity this week to collaborate with Councilmember Bell and the Deputy Mayor on the equity statement. And I'm really, really excited about our next steps and our the next phase of our retreat that'll happen in May and the things that we have coming on the horizon. I also was at the spring cleanup, and I was at the other end of the spectrum from Councilmember Bell, and it was not a happy situation. So I am very much looking forward to what we can do to help make this right. It was an unfortunate circumstance. It sounds like a number of stars did not align in the correct manner, and we had a lot of unhappy folks who may have rented vehicles to come and some expectations that were set and then not kept. And so so I feel for the folks who were in line and didn't make it in on Sunday. Looking forward to next steps there. I have a Community Service Advisory Board meeting this week, and then I sit on the Legal Practices Subcommittee for our Sex Offender Policy Board, and we're taking up a couple of issues this week, and that is my report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boki.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm going to chime in on the award. Usually I wouldn't, but when you look at how few municipalities either try or don't try or don't get it, and it isn't just it's an important part of public trust, right? And I actually go about once a decade to these incredibly exciting GFOA annual conferences. And, there's nothing like a bunch of municipal people getting together. No joking. I see Councilmember Bell laughing, thinking that the communications people are no, there's nothing like a good party when the accountants get together. And no, but they do take their profession very seriously. And there are a lot of very qualified people out there nationally who do this work. So when awards are given out, it's easy to take them lightly, but we shouldn't, because it is a sign of the public trust, which I think is our most important thing that we have. I got to sit on the PCRC meeting as a substitute for Ms. Farmer. I will let the Deputy Mayor bring us up to date on that. I thought it was actually a very good meeting, very informative. They didn't. So, and the other thing is there will be the business relief stuff is the county council passed $4 million for immediate relief, $10,000 max, pretty much the same guidelines, although they made some changes to the guidelines in an emergency ordinance that Tuesday to expand the number of businesses really going through it. Now, what I do want to point out is that the Rescue Act has a large amount of funding for business relief in it, and in several different ways: venue relief, relief for businesses, those that include not-for-profits and various things like that. We may want to consider, one of the things that keeps kind of coming up and I think we talked about it, but I do want us to consider, because it's coming up at the county level also, that there are so many things going on and there's so many pots of money that actually one of the things that we may consider doing is, and I correct me if I'm wrong, City Manager, you may have already mentioned this, of finding people to actually help these businesses access those funds. The PPP loan program, for instance, is out there again. There's various programs and they're all running through the SBA, which is a rather small agency. So to be able to access funding, they may need some help. Along with the rental plan is also going to have, rental payments. I don't know if there's more commercial mortgage assistance, but there is going to be rental assistance for individuals. And I know last time we did a real good job of making sure that everybody had the list and everyone knew what's going on. And that's going to be out there for a while too. They put a lot of money into that. And I think that's going to come through the county, but it comes down through a separate, I'm calling them tranches, just so we're aware of that. There's a lot of money out there, but some of the businesses may need help being able to even access it, accessing the right forms and various things like that. It's not clear how language issues are going to be handled in this. And I think the SBA is probably going to say, well, that's your problem to deal with at the local level. So those are all things that as we go forward, we may want to consider and kind of get a global idea of what other impacts these other funding sources are going to have. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No, I just want to echo a few comments here. The GFAO thing, again, I think it's just fine to load on the compliments, because it wasn't that long ago, before Mr. Caulfield's tenure, that we wondered whether we actually had a balanced budget. And so I don't think we can ever take it for granted, the wonderful work that our staff under the leadership of the city manager has done and continues to do for the citizens, because transparency and prudent financial stewardship is really what we're all about. And the fact that we do it to an excellent level, recognized by those who really understand it, is just wonderful. And the more we can put that out there in the ether, the better. On Thursday, we did the Pierce County Regional Council. As Mr. Boki indicated, there was just a lot of discussion, no action items. It was a high-level discussion for many members who were new. And so you tend to do a little re-education of what countywide planning policies are, and the role of the Puget Sound Regional Council, and how we're going to break these into chunks for the county to digest through PCRC as we go forward this next year. So more to follow on that. If we get some action items, certainly we will bring forth the information to you so you can provide us input to be your representatives to the PCRC. Thursday was also the opportunity for me to get my second COVID shot. I just put the plug out there. Those of us who are in the public arena, I think it's a good thing for us to set the example. I do believe that getting more of us vaccinated sooner than later is going to help Pierce County get to phase 3 and beyond. And I am a big fan of that as a guy who's all about small business, because the more we can keep this place safe and sane, the more our businesses can open. And then finally, in line with Ms. Bell's comment, we are the liaisons to the Arts Commission subcommittee on the public art project. It was a fabulous opportunity to meet over there at the Colonial Center to review with 6 artists, the opportunity for a nice piece of public art or 2. We don't know what their proposals may be. We do have interviews next week that flow from their walkthrough with us. I can tell you that during the meeting, we had discussions about placement and how any remediation of the pavers or the installation is all going to be part of the budget. And we got a few looks from some of the artists on that. So we do have a budget, but I just want to plant the seed that when these proposals come back from the interviews next week, I'm just planting the seed that we may need to come back to council and get authority for maybe some additional funds. I don't want to say that yet, but I just want to plant the seed. We've reduced the water feature, we've reduced the gateway components, but we still want to do this right. We have one shot. So that's all I'm going to say about that at this time. And unless there are any further comments, it is 10:09. I think we did some good work tonight. Thank you all.